Thank you all for being here today. I first would like to welcome our friends from the Senate. Chairman Tester and Ranking Member Moran will be along later. We thank them for joining us here. We were at their house last week, and they're in our house today, and we're glad to have them here. You know, I also want to welcome Mr. Timothy Borland, Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States. And I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to congratulate former VFW Executive Director Bob Wallace on his decades of service to our veterans. And I wish him well in his retirement. Bob, I would also like to congratulate Mr. Ryan Galusi. Okay, yeah, people mispronounce Bost all the time too, so you know. On the beginning, being here, the first post 9/11 veteran named as the Executive Director of the VFW's Washington office. Congratulations. I'd also like, if I could, now understand that I want the people that might be watching this and they're looking out across this crowd, understand we have this room full and 2 overflow rooms full. So we have a great amount of our veterans in attendance, and we appreciate you for being here, and we thank you for your service. But there's a certain group of you that I'd like to recognize, and that's from my home state of Illinois. And if you're from Illinois, if you stand up and say hi and wave, and there they are in the back. There they are. Okay, it's a great honor for me to be here today, serving as the House Committee on Veterans Affairs Chairman. You know, alongside with Ranking Member Takano, we share the same mission of delivering the best care and support to our veterans. You know, I'm proud of everything that we accomplished in last Congress, but we all know that the work is far from over. Now, this hearing is an excellent opportunity to learn more about what we can do to improve the lives of our veterans nationwide. Now, the VFW has vitally important information and insight into what the veterans actually experience and when they go to the VA. Our committees need your help to ensure that veterans receive the services they deserve. As chairman, one of my main priorities is ensuring that the VA properly implement the PACT Act. This law was long overdue, and it's a long overdue win for veterans and their families. It is now our responsibility to hold VA accountable to ensure that toxic exposed veterans have access to the care they need. You all know better than anyone what does and does not work. We need you all to be vocal so we can address any problems when they arise. Another one of my priorities as chairman is ensuring veterans' Second Amendment rights are not taken away just because they need help managing their benefits. You know, I am proud of the legislation, H.R. 705, the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, and grateful for the 58 members of Congress who've joined me in this effort. I appreciate the VFW's support on this issue. We will end this discrimination practice this Congress, guaranteed. This effort, and many more made by my colleagues in the House and in the Senate, are a good start, but we need to keep up the fight. Veterans are still fighting a VA bureaucracy to access the health care they need, when they need it, where they need it. They're enduring long wait times for their earned benefits or getting a simple question answered. Dealing with underperforming VA employees who don't have the veteran's best interest in mind. And dealing with the impacts of flawed electronic health record system. Now, I am making my commitment to you now that I will work tirelessly in my role as chairman to ensure that we will not stop until every veteran no longer have to fight for benefits that they have already earned for their time in service. You know, this work has always been personal to me, both as a veteran myself and a father and a grandfather of Marines. Generations of veterans have earned a system that works for them. This is my #1 priority. And before I finish, I'd like to recognize the service of one of our staffers who will be departing at the end of this month. Mr. John Towers has been serving veterans and their families for a number of different chairmen and ranking members on both sides of the rotunda. For over 25 years, John has worked, and that's no small feat if you know all the things that he's done, and if you've been around here, and I'm telling you, whether it's House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, all know the work that John has done. So, John, thank you for your commitment to the men and women who've served, and congratulations on a job well done. Your experience, sense of humor, and friendship will be missed around this place. Now, just so you know, it's too bad that Senator Moran isn't here where I can harass him about the fact that he took you away from us just before I took this job. But we'll have to deal with that at a later date. But we do wish you well. But now I would like to yield to Chairman Tester for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Boston. Before I get into my remarks, not that this is John Towers Appreciation Day, but just want to say, John, you're a good man. It's been great to work with you, and thank you. Thank you very much for the work you've done. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome the national leadership from the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the members here today, and those watching from Montana and around the country. I especially want to welcome the Montana delegation, including Tim Peters and Joe Fletcher, Jack Hawley, Fred Hamilton, Jeff Schlepp. Stand up, folks. Thank you very much. I had a chance to visit you guys yesterday, and I just want to thank you for what you do every day for the folks back home in Montana. Commander Borland, thank you for what you are here today to do, and for your continued VFW advocacy for our nation's veterans. The VFW played a critical role in helping get the PACT Act signed into law. And I just want to tell you, that isn't just a statement, that is a fact. The lady sitting behind Senator Kelly to his right did an amazing job in a hearing we had because she held folks like me accountable. And we want to thank you for the work that you've done. Now, I'm looking to you again to help us understand how implementation is going. We don't often talk about it enough, but the PACT Act delivered more than expansion of health care and benefits. It also strengthened the VA's ability to establish new facilities to serve our veterans. We took historic steps that invested in the VA's infrastructure through new recruitment and retention incentives, funding for 31 new health clinics and research facilities, and additional tools to build clinics and cut government red tape. We also gave VA expanded authority to repurpose and lease out unused or vacant buildings, benefiting veterans and saving taxpayers' funds in the process. To continue to improve infrastructure for veterans, we need to make VA construction planning more efficient. We need to increase oversight and provide more stable funding. And that is why I'm proud to work with the VFW for several years to draft legislation, the Bill for Veterans Act. I hope we continue to work together and get this one over the finish line. We also need to protect new PACT Act benefits. I'd like to hear from you about what you're seeing and what you're hearing from veterans on the ground when it comes to frauds and scams. We've heard about issues with attorney fees from the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, and we know that VSOs have endorsed multiple bills to establish caps, including the VFW. We thank you for that. And we also don't want to lose sight of claim sharks. VA has been asking us for years to reinstate their ability to go after the people taking a veteran's benefit for their own profit, and I believe we should work together to make that happen. For the veterans here today, thank you for your service. Thank you for your work that you do on behalf of veterans in your states. We look forward to hearing from each of you. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Chairman Boston.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, we would want to recognize Chairman Takano, our Ranking Member Takano. He had to be called away, and to deliver his opening remarks, we recognize Representative Brownlee.
Thank you, Chairman Boston. I am not Mark Takano, but I am here on his behalf, and it is truly an honor to be here with all of you today. It's great to see all of the VSO members in the room. First and most important question, are there any Californians in the room this morning? All right, a very special welcome to you. So it's an honor to join all of the members of the House and Senate committees of Veteran Affairs to hear directly from the Commander-in-Chief and representatives of the veterans of foreign wars. I'd also like to welcome the diverse group of organizations we'll hear from on the second panel. It's great to see all of you here as well, and I look forward to hearing about the priorities of Jewish war veterans, Wounded Warrior Project, TAPS, MOA, AMVETS, Gold Star Wives, Military Order of the Purple Heart, BVA, and the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers. I look forward to hearing your testimony today, and I thank you for your continued advocacy and support for the veteran community. The opportunity to hear from our VSO partners is critical to do our work. You all provide much-needed resources and representation for veterans and their families and survivors at all stages of life and service. In addition, your organizations give us much better insight into issues our veterans face and how we can best address them. For example, it was VFW's statement for the record in 2019 that led staff to write the Veterans Access Act, which later became part of the Veterans Compact Act. The new benefit, which went live earlier this year, removes costs from the equation when veterans are at imminent risk of self-harm and allows them to access life-saving care when they need it most, regardless of whether the veteran has ever enrolled or used VA healthcare benefits. Any veteran experiencing a mental health crisis should call 988 and press 1 to speak with a trained professional from the Veterans Crisis Line. I hope you and other VSOs will continue raising concerns with our staff. This is how life-changing legislation comes to fruition. I'd like to continue that track record. I was encouraged to see the overwhelming support the VFW and other VSOs provided last Congress to pass Mr. Takano's bill, the Honoring Our Pact Act, and get it signed into law. Thank you for the tremendous support you provided throughout the process. Getting the PACT Act to President Biden's desk is a testament to the strong advocacy and support from passionate groups like yours. I'd also like to express my thanks to Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, and Chairman Bose for their efforts to work with Mr. Takano on passing this law. Our bipartisan bill expands VA health care to over 3.5 million veterans living with the effects of toxic exposure. Our bill removes the burden of proof, which for too long has prevented toxic exposed veterans from accessing the care and benefits they need to treat their rare conditions. In total, the PACT Act establishes a presumption of service connection for 23 respiratory illnesses and cancer. Blue Water Navy veterans waited more than 40 years for benefits related to Agent Orange exposure because of Congress's piecemeal solutions. We were not going to let this happen again. Thanks to our efforts last Congress, we kept our promise. Now the hard work begins, and I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues to make sure this transformational law is implemented effectively. In the last Congress, together we secured several important wins for veterans, including, as already mentioned, passing the landmark PACT Act, and in addition, passing the Military Sexual Trauma Claims Coordination Act, the Remote Act, the Thrive Act, and the Sergeant Ketchum Rural Veterans Mental Health Act. We were also able to wrap up the 117th Congress with packages of veterans legislation, including the Strong Veterans Act and the Cleland Dole Memorial Veterans Benefits and Healthcare Improvement Act. I am very proud of these accomplishments, but we need to build on these achievements and continue our fight for better health care and benefits in this Congress and beyond. Mr. Takano's priorities and my priorities for this Congress include opposing efforts to cut over $31 billion in VA funding, including funding for the 3.5 million newly eligible toxic exposed veterans, preserving women veterans' freedom, delivering a VA for all veterans, modernizing VA care for the next generation of veterans, ensuring that no veteran is forgotten, working to end veteran homelessness and food insecurity, ensuring benefits parity for Americans' veterans, rejecting efforts to privatize the VA, conducting critical oversight and implementation of suicide prevention and toxic exposure bills, and empowering VA to fulfill its fourth mission capabilities. These are big goals, but I know that with your support and insight here today, along with the support of the Biden-Harris administration, we will be able to achieve these goals and fulfill the sacred promises we made to our nation's veterans. However, I'm deeply concerned by the budget proposals from the new Republican House majority and what it will mean for all of the accomplishments I just mentioned. VFW represents the largest number of combat veterans in the country, and the VSOs on our second panel represent hundreds of thousands of veterans and survivors as well, many of whom are eligible for new care and benefits due to the passage of the PACT Act. What Republicans are proposing would hollow out veteran programs and pit veterans funding against other domestic priorities. What programs would you cut that serve your fellow veterans and fellow Americans? Do they propose restricting which toxic exposed veteran can receive health care and benefits? Should disabled veterans see fewer benefits? I've asked my Republican colleagues what they think should be on the chopping block in order to return VA to fiscal year 2022 budget levels and effectively cut $31 billion from VA's budget, but they don't seem too keen to answer. Maybe you can ask them. I think millions of Americans will be interested in hearing their response. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Gallucci to introduce the individuals on the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committees, I'm honored to have the privilege of introducing the national officers of the VFW and our auxiliary. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to ask those to be introduced to stand and remain standing, and I wish to request our comrades from the VFW in the audience to hold its applause until all have been introduced. From the VFW Auxiliary, the National President of our VFW Auxiliary, Jan Reep from New York, Senior Vice President of our Auxiliary, Carla Martinez of Utah, Junior Vice President, Brenda Bryant from Missouri, and the National Auxiliary Secretary-Treasurer, Ann Pantelikos from Connecticut, as well as the Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief's wife, Carol Liphart from Georgia, and the National Officers of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Dwayne Sarmiento from New Jersey, Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Al Liphart from Georgia, Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief Designee, Carol Whitmore from Iowa, Adjutant General Dan West from Texas, Quartermaster General Mark Garduno from Delaware, Assistant Adjutant General Brian Walker from Tennessee, Chaplain Deborah Halter from Missouri, Judge Advocate General Thomas T.C. Rollins from Mississippi, Chief of Staff Cynthia Archuleta from Arizona, Inspector General Sean Watson from Guam, Surgeon General Daniel Kell from New York, Supreme Commander of the Military Order of the Cootie, Dwight Hora from South Carolina, Chairman of our Legislative Committee, Deborah Johnson from California, Director, VFW National Legislative Service, Patrick M. Murray from Rhode Island, and Director, VFW National Veterans Service, Michael Figlioli from Massachusetts. I would further also like to recognize the 9th class of VFW SVA Legislative Fellows, the VFW Women Veterans Committee, and our past Commanders-in-Chief who are with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gallucci, and thank you all for being here today. Now, at this time, I would like to turn this over to Senator Mark Kelly, who is a fellow Arizonan VFW member, to introduce Commander Borland to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great honor for me to introduce a distinguished guest and great Arizonan, Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Mr. Tim Borland. Tim's an Army guy. I'm not going to hold that against him. Enlisting in 1979. Tim served in the Army's military intelligence branch and was stationed all around the world, and his last assignment was with the 101st Airborne Division. My dad was in the 82nd. Still good. And he served in Iraq from 2005 to 2006, and then Tim returned home to Arizona and retired at the rank of First Sergeant in June of 2007. And in recognition of his exemplary service, he received numerous decorations, including 4 Meritorious Service Medals, 4 Army Commendation Medals, the Iraq Campaign Medal, and 4 Overseas Service Ribbons. Like a lot of Arizona veterans, myself included, service runs in his blood. Tim is 4th generation retired Army. That's significant, retired Army, 4th generation. His great-grandfather served in World War I, his grandfather served in World War II, and both his mom and dad served in the Army for 20 years. Now Tim's own kids, Levi, Jonathan, and Lee, they're all serving as well. Tim became a VFW member at Post 9972 in Arizona, where he lives with his wife Shannon. He was an All-American Post District and Department Commander, and he served on the National Council of Administration. In July, Tim was elected as the VFW's 114th Commander-in-Chief, becoming the first Iraq War vet to lead our nation's most established combat veterans organization. And Tim has urged the VFW to embrace new generations of veterans while ensuring that veterans of past conflicts are not left behind, ensuring that every veteran counts. To my colleagues in both the Senate and the House Veterans Affairs Committees, it's my honor to introduce the VFW's Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Tim Borland.
Thank you, Senator, and if you would like to stay, we would be more than happy to have you here, but if not, we understand how this place is, and you're free to leave if you need to. Now I would like to recognize Commander Borland for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Well, first of all, thank you, Senator Kelly, for that warm welcome. Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, members of the Senate and House Committees on Veterans Affairs, it's my honor to be with you today on behalf of more than 1.5 million veterans of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and its auxiliary of the United States to fulfill our obligations to Congress and to provide consistent reports to Congress. I would like to begin by thanking the members of the committees for your hard work in the 117th Congress, working across the aisle and across chambers to pass legislation that truly shows that every veteran counts. With reforms like the PACT Act, your committees continue to be examples of how work should be done on Capitol Hill. The VFW's full written submission covers much more, such as working to help our caregivers, addressing veteran homelessness, VA's flawed efforts to update its health record, and the full accounting of our nation's POW, MIA. And with this is why we fully support the mission to bring all our mission service members home. At this joint hearing last year, the VFW called upon Congress to pass the PACT Act, the most comprehensive toxic exposure legislation in American history. It was the honor of a lifetime to be able to represent the VFW when this historic legislation was signed into law. All across the country, VFW service officers are assisting veterans with their PACT Act claims and have already seen conditions approved and rated. VA has moved aggressively to process PACT Act claims with more than 100,000 of these claims already rated, one of which is my own. VA has also worked with VSOs like the VFW to clearly communicate what veterans should expect from the process. Veterans can visit pactactinfo.org to learn more about their benefits and to link up with VA-accredited service officers to help them apply. This service has already helped thousands of veterans free of charge. While the PACT Act is a big win for veterans facing exposures, we must do more for the surviving families who are left behind when loved ones die in the line of duty and from service-connected injuries or illnesses. The PACT Act finally fulfills a critical promise to many survivors who now qualify for benefits, but DIC is still not equal to other federal survival programs. The VFW urges Congress to pass legislation that would fully increase DIC payments to survivors from 43% to 55% to get with parity of the other federal agencies. With this passage of the PACT Act, the VFW has seen an increase in online ads from predatory claim consultants that we call claim sharks. They target veterans' earned VA benefits, promise them increase of VA disability ratings. They argue that the high fees they charge make them more effective in assisting veterans than the free services our properly trained VA accredited service organizations, county VSOs, and accredited agents or attorneys. Several of these predatory companies have made statements that there's no path for them to seek VA accreditation. But this is completely untrue. There are no restrictions for these consultants to become VA accredited, but they refuse to do so because they will no longer be able to charge such outrageous fees. They would also be subject to oversight by the VA's General Counsel. Currently, these companies have no accountability, no oversight, and no penalties. In fact, one company during the House Veterans Affairs hearing provided inaccurate testimony when asked about receiving a cease and desist letter from the VA. Companies that prey upon veterans and blatantly disregard congressional oversight authority should be held accountable, period. This is why we strongly urge the passage of the Guard VA Benefits Act. If VA representatives charge for claims help, they would lose their accreditation and be subject to both fines and jail time. Claim sharks should be treated the same way. The VFW believes VA benefits are a critical tool to not only help veterans succeed after service, but also protect against suicide. Suicide prevention is not simply a clinical priority that should not be viewed as such. Suicide prevention should encompass benefit usage and delivery alongside mental health care. For far too long, suicide prevention has been viewed as simply a mental health issue when that is only half the battle. VA economic benefits can prevent veterans from ending their lives. An example of this key link to suicide prevention is addressed by one of this year's VFW SVA Student Veteran Fellows, Chet Bennett, who is here with us today. His proposals highlights financial stress increases many of the risk factors associated with mental health crisis. Studies have shown that veterans with PTSD who are also experiencing financial stress exhibited an increase in many risky behaviors, including suicidal thoughts. This is why VFW believes VA's Office of Suicide Prevention needs to be moved out of the Veteran Health Administration over to the VA so it can report on and utilize information across the agency to combat suicide. Keeping this critical office in VHA prevents it from reaching its full potential. Each time a veteran uses a benefit, we have an opportunity to provide resources for suicide intervention. Access to economic opportunity benefits from the point of transition is critical. We owe it to our veterans to understand every access point to VA and how it affects their well-being. This is how we show every veteran counts. The VFW also believes there is significant value when accredited representatives are part of the Military Transition Assistance Program, TAP. We would like to see these representatives offered the chance to facilitate course materials that cover VA benefits and services. Service members have a very slim window, usually 3 to 6 months before separation, in which they are eligible to file VA disability benefits through the benefits delivery at discharge, also called our BDD. Accredited representatives would not only be able to highlight the program, but also help service members file claims as soon as possible, which is something that VA employees and contract briefers just can't do. VFW's BDD program currently supports transition service members at 20 military installations, and we need more. Overseas, they need them. Service members who use resources like BDD representatives face fewer hurdles during transition. Senior military leaders understand this. For example, general officers and senior non-commissioned officers frequently reach out to the VFW for more in-depth knowledge on VA benefits process. If our military leaders see this as a priority, then VA should make it a priority for everyone leaving the military. The VFW insists accredited representatives are incorporated into the transition assistance program at every base possible to ensure separating service members have the ability to access their care and benefits as soon as they take off their uniform for the last time. And some of those veterans who finally depart the service do so involuntarily through medical discharges due to wounds received on the battlefield. For nearly 2 decades, these veterans and many other retirees have waited for Congress to end the long-standing unjust practice of offsetting DOD retirement and VA disability pay. Scores of veterans are required to forfeit all or part of one benefit, even though they are earned for entirely 2 different reasons. Though I recently called on the White House and Congress to push for full concurrent receipt for all military retirees, the VFW's first priority is to serve these injustice for medical retirees through the Major Richard Starr Act. Major Richard Starr was forced to medically retire after he was diagnosed with cancer in 2018. He and his wife, Tanya, became strong advocates for concurrent receipt for the medical retirees, and the VFW was proud to work alongside him. Unfortunately, in 2021, he died before he could see Congress fix this injustice. We will not wait any longer. We thank Chairman Tester and Senator Crapo for reintroducing this critical legislation. We need to get this passed because every veteran counts. Before I close, I need to speak to a problem I just saw firsthand. Visiting American soldiers serving on the front lines of NATO in Poland, Ryan Gallucci and myself had the honor to go there and met with key leaders. It was clear to me that many Americans do not fully understand what we are asking our service members to do today, which makes it hard for the commanders on the ground to inspire those they lead. Thankfully, one simple solution can help. When Russia invaded Ukraine last February, we quickly sent our service members to 9 countries in defense of NATO, most of them National Guard soldiers. The VFW calls on the DOD and Congress to properly recognize the immense contributions of those who have served and are serving on the eastern flank of NATO by awarding them the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal for deterring Russian aggression. Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, and other distinguished members of these committees, speaking for all members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and its auxiliary, and on behalf of the millions of service members, veterans and their families around the world, I would like to thank you for your time and attention to these critical issues. I will conclude with my call to action and remind everybody that we must meet the challenge to take care of these critical issues for those we represent, because every veteran counts. Thank you. This concludes my remarks, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Borland, for your testimony, and I will recognize myself, if I can, for 5 minutes to start the questioning. Commander, you know, currently, a veteran loses their Second Amendment rights when they are appointed a fiduciary to manage their VA benefits. My bill, H.R. 705, would ensure that these veterans receive due process before they are deprived of their right to bear arms. Do I have the VFW's support for my bill? Thank you.
I forgot that.
Commander, some individuals are helping veterans with their claims without being accredited by VA. You brought that up in your testimony. What is the VFW's position on these individuals and their fees that the veterans are being charged?
Well, first of all, we believe that accredited service officers should be doing our claims with veterans that have served our country in defense. They are properly accredited to do the claims for free. The claim sharks that we're dealing with right now took advantage during the COVID crisis, unfortunately, the last 2.5, 3 years. The VAs were closed down. Veterans were unable to go see their health providers. So these claim sharks are out there out of control, contacting veterans through any means possible and promising them VA disability claims at outrageous percentages. But these veterans had to get something done because VA was unable to do it at the time because we couldn't go there. For more of this, I would like to pass it to Pat Murray, our National Legislative Director.
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Chairman Boss, the bottom line is if accredited representatives charge fees the way they do, they would be fined or possibly imprisoned. We want that same standard met for everybody helping prepare, present, and prosecute claims before Department of Veteran Affairs.
Thank you. Commander, your testimony highlights the importance of the Transition Assistance Program for service members. However, spouses are often left behind by DOD during the transition period. What steps should DOD take to ensure that spouses are also included in the TAP program, and what is the importance of this?
That's a great question. Back when I retired about 18 years ago, we had in the Army what was called ACAP. We were only allowed 1 year to transition out of the Army. At least the Transition Assistance Program allows these service members 2 years to process out of the Army, and all we need to do is get with DOD and other military major commands and allow the spouses to attend these briefings with their service members so they too can benefit with the transition of them leaving the service.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I'm running short on time, but I'm just glad we have the TAP program. Many in this room have heard me say before, whenever I got out, whether it was a TAP program, the TAP program was my commanding officer tapping you on the shoulder and said, "See you later." That was it. But I am glad with the TAP program that is available. With that, I will yield back and turn and recognize Chairman Tester for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bost, and thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it very, very much. To improve infrastructure for veterans, we need to fix several areas, including infrastructure staffing levels, cutting VA red tape, more oversight, and stable funding. Commander Borland, can you or a member of your team tell me how you think the Build for Veterans Act would push the VA to increase their capacity and actually deliver more projects for the VA each year?
Yes, sir. First of all, the Build Act is providing $60 to $80 billion. We think that the management of the infrastructure and the contractors need to be oversighted. We need them to be more involved in the development of infrastructure. This includes computers, air conditionings, water pipes, buildings. The better we make the VA facilities for our veterans, the more we'll get nurses and doctors to step up and possibly work for the VA. Pat Murray, if you'd like to add some more to that, this is his expertise.
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. So, Senator Tester, we support the Build Act. We've worked very well with your office to to craft that. What we need to do is begin by building internal capacity at VA, hiring more people to actually oversee these projects, because the chief mentioned there's $60 to $80 billion worth of backlog. And if we want to knock that down in 10 years, that means $6 to $8 billion at least to start to begin to drop that. They've only been, for the past few administrations, pushing anywhere from $3 to $5 billion annually for that. We need to increase that and end the infrastructure problem.
Appreciate your guys' views and support on that. Infrastructure is really important for a number of reasons, not the least of which is recruiting more docs and nurses in the VA, which is another issue, which I'll probably let somebody else deal with. I do want to talk about VA medical cannabis and the VA Medical Cannabis Research Act of 2023, which requires further research by the VA to understand cannabis efficacy and treating ailments facing our veterans. Effective treatment options must be based on comprehensive research, science. And VA research should empower veterans to make informed decisions about their health. So I'd love to know your guys' view if you feel VA has been proactive in conducting research on veterans' cannabis use, and what can be done about it if the answer is no.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, we support this.
Okay.
We have mixed emotions with veterans, either in favor or against, because it's cannabis. But there are military personnel out there that have TBI and mental health, PTSD issues that find cannabis as another solution to solve their issues. And it also reduces medication that's provided by the VA. There's a lot of veterans out there that get so much medication, they don't know what to take half the time they have it. Some of them have poor eyesight and they take the wrong medication. This will prevent overdose. This will prevent a lot of other issues. Medical cannabis is a possible solution to help with TBI and mental health issues. On more of this, if Pat Murray would like to add, I'd be more than happy to hear his suggestions.
Hey, Chief, just put a final stamp on that. Yes, sir, we are in favor of researching that. We want to be smart about as many alternative therapies we can provide for our veterans around the country as possible. We don't think VA is doing enough of a good job on that. They've been dragging their feet. They've been saying they've been doing studies and research for years. We're waiting to see the results, as everybody is. We want to see that actually get done appropriately.
Thank you. And Mr. Borland, I have the same reservations about this as you do. And I think that if we can get good research, it could help clear up a lot of problems. One last thing, the GUARD Act is being introduced today, and it's probably because of your testimony why it's being introduced. So thank you.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized for the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander Borland, in your testimony, you discussed how critical it is that we do more to serve our veteran caregivers. In addition to the caregiver program, there are several programs across VA that can serve elderly and disabled veterans, allowing them to stay in their homes and out of institutionalized care. My Elizabeth Dole Home and Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregiver Act will expand these programs and coordinate handoffs from the caregiver program. For example, the Veterans Directed Care Program would serve the same veterans and caregivers trying to access the caregiver program today. Can you explain a bit more why it's important that we expand these homes and these home and community-based programs and services?
First of all, I'd like to tell you the VFW does support your bill.
Thank you.
We are definitely looking out for the care providers that take care of our veterans, and we do understand that we need more care providers at home. It's easier for the veterans, especially if they're handicapped. It's just better to be home than to be out of home in a hospital with strangers or in vet centers that are overflowing. Some vet centers are not just overflowing, but there's shortage on nurses and doctors because since ever COVID's happened, there's a shortage. For more of this, I would love to pass this off to Mike Figlioli. He's our members, veterans director. Mike, can you share a little bit more about the caregiver program?
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Yes, sir, we certainly support that act. We are aware of, as the Commander-in-Chief said, that there are a number of facilities that are backlogged, that have access issues to allow veterans in. The capacity is high. We also understand that there's a shortage of doctors and nurses that are available at this moment because others have moved on to the private sector for more lucrative employment. So we are eager to see that we have more facilities. Years ago, VA used to run domiciliaries, which was a popular issue. Now it's been outsourced a bit to other facilities because of, again, capacity issues. The veteran deserves the care where they're at. The veteran deserves first-class quality care at all times. And if that means providing that care in their home, then we owe it to that veteran to do so.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I would just add that I think our biggest challenge in terms of moving this bill forward, there's broad-based support for the bill. The problem is how CBO is scoring the bill. So I think what we have to kind of get across is this is really sort of win-win. We know that health outcomes are better when a veteran or anyone is cared for at home versus institutionalized care. And we also know that it costs less than institutionalized care. So we've got to get those points across because it really is what we do want. We would love to save some money to reinvest in other programs, but most importantly, we want the best health outcomes for our veterans, and this is the way to achieve that. So I will look forward to working with you on this bill to see it through this Congress. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Browning. Representative Van Dorn.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it greatly. I am a lifetime member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and I go to Post 1530 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm telling you, I'm very proud of you. I know it takes a while to get out here, and it can be a hassle, but I'm very proud of you for coming out here. Now, Commander, unfortunately, several of my fellow veterans from Wisconsin came to my office yesterday, so I need an address to submit an invoice for the beer they drank. I'll be giving that to you. It's Borland, right? Got that. Hey, listen, I've been honored to be given the privilege of chairing a subcommittee that's responsible for the transition from being a active duty service member to a veteran homelessness, and also education. And so, Commander, I just want to ask you something about the Vet Tech program, the pilot program. Are you familiar with this? It is a program that was established in 2019, and it provides veterans with the opportunity to use GI Bill style benefits to participate in short-term training for IT jobs. The program has been very successful with a graduation rate of 84% and an average salary of over $65,000. So, Commander, have you received any feedback concerning this program?
I'm sure Pat Murray has, our National Legislative Director. I would like to pass that to him since I don't know much about that act.
Very well, thank you.
Congressman, the Vet Tech program is a fantastic program.
Okay.
Some additional resources were provided to it last Congress to make sure that additional students were able to utilize the program. It gets them back to high-paying, in-demand jobs, and it allows them to get those jobs, start paying more money back into our system through taxes. So veterans employed paying back into the system with in-demand jobs is a critically important thing. We would love to expand that program as large as possible.
Roger that. I'll tell you what, just for your knowledge, thank you very much for that, Mr. Murray. My number one legislative priority on the subcommittee is the transition from active duty to veterans. And the reason being is that people don't understand, man. You know, you're a veteran or you're an active duty service member Monday and Tuesday, you're a vet. And in that 24-hour period of time, you lose your mission, you lose your focus, you lose your uniform, you lose your identity. I told this to the guys the other day, it's twice the husband, half the paycheck. And it's very stressful, and that's why our men and women unfortunately choose often to end their lives. So I want you to know that the members of this committee, and on my subcommittee in particular, are working diligently every day because you have built this nation, and we are free because of your service. So God bless you all. Thank you so much for coming.
Representative Pappas, you are recognized for your question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the leadership and membership of VFW for joining us here for this hearing, with a special shout out to my good friends from the Live Free or Die state of New Hampshire who are here. I'll see you later in my office. Unfortunately, we have no beer in my office, but it'll be great to see you nonetheless. I always learn a lot from those conversations, and it was from conversations with veterans in New Hampshire and with VFW that I heard about this issue of claim sharks. And I think you appropriately talked about what these people do, taking advantage of veterans, these unaccredited actors. It's probably a too polite way to refer to what these folks do out there, but we're going to hold them accountable and pass some legislation on it. So I'm proud that we were able to reintroduce this bill in the House. I want to commend Representative Radewagen for working with me on this issue. And again, this would reinstate criminal penalties for these unaccredited claim representatives who are charging exorbitant fees in some cases while assisting veterans with filing a claim for disability compensation benefits. We know that VFW, like other VSOs, helps veterans filing these claims through their VA-accredited representatives. These accredited representatives are the only individuals who are authorized to prepare, present, and prosecute VA claims, as has been said, on a veteran's behalf. So I was going to ask you about what concerns you have. I think you stated that very clearly, and we look forward to working with you to pass this legislation. And I just want to say these Hill visits do have an impact on the number of co-sponsors we get and the momentum that we get behind important common sense ideas like the GUARD VA Benefits Act. Maybe I could just ask you this question: as we work to pass this legislative solution, do you think there are other things that VA could be doing to raise awareness and education around the problem of unaccredited representatives who are charging fees for our veterans?
First of all, sir, I want to thank you for sponsoring that bill. It's a critical bill for our veterans. We need to let our veterans know that our service officers are out there to do it for free. We need to also hold these claim sharks accountable for what they're doing. They need to be VA accredited. They need to we need to put a cap on it, for God's sakes, the way they go after our veterans out there. It's just unheard of. The veteran serves our country. We stand for the country. We stand and fight for the country. We give the ultimate sacrifice. The veteran should be taken care of by properly trained, accredited service officers, and we got that right here on the Hill with the Veteran Military National Service, Veteran Services, Mike Figlioli, who can add more to this.
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Thank you, Mr. Representative. We have worked very diligently to educate not only our membership about claim sharks, but the public. We have also reached out to other government agencies. We've worked with the Association of Attorneys General, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Something has got to be done to raise these people in, because, as the Commander-in-Chief said, they are out of control. They have not one modicum of the amount of training or knowledge that our professionally trained accredited representatives that serve not only here in the United States, but across the world provide that service for free. Last year, the VFW Accredited Service Program recovered $11.2 billion for our veterans, and not one dime went to our organization. That needs to be heard. As the executive director said back in April, I agree. The Capitol Police should have stopped them at the door. They deserve to be in jail. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you for your work. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Representative Crane.
Thank you guys for coming today. I gotta admit, I feel a little out of suit and a little exposed because you guys all have these really cool hats, and I've got none. And I'm losing my hair, so that's why I wear hats all the time. I think we could all admit that my colleague, Congressman Van Orden from Wisconsin, really needs a hat. And you guys agree to that? All right. I do want to say something real quick. One of my colleagues on the other side talked about, Republicans and budget cuts, right? I know you guys heard that. And I'm hoping you guys know why. We are $31 trillion in debt in this country. I go from meeting to meeting to meeting with this group, small business group, Veterans Affairs group, everybody and everyone. Do you know how many times I go into a meeting where somebody tells me, hey, you guys are doing such a great job funding us, we don't need more money. Never happens. I'm looking at brothers and sisters in this room. Many of you guys don't know my bio. I dropped out of college my senior year in Arizona, and I joined the Navy the week after 9/11, went to the SEAL teams. Okay, then when I got done with that, me and my wife started a small business, a veteran-owned small business, where we made our products in the USA, and we hired as many veterans as we could, and we worked with as many veteran nonprofits as we could as well, because I needed a mission like many of you do when you got out. Okay, so when you hear that Republicans are looking to make budget cuts, it's not because we don't love you. My God, I love each and every one of you because I know what you've been through. Okay, but I want you guys to understand that. How many of you guys agree that our service to this country doesn't end when we take off the uniform? Right? Guys, I never wanted to be a congressman. I certainly never wanted to get into politics. You guys know why I'm here? Because I am scared to death that my daughters aren't going to be able to enjoy what we've enjoyed because of the fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption up in this town. So yes, we are looking at how can we do things better? How can we do things more efficiently? And I know you guys all saw it in the military because I saw it. Some of the just nonsense that we would do, some of the nonsense that we would spend money on, and this is the same government. Okay, so yes, we are looking at how to reduce the budget and the reckless, out-of-control spending. And guess what? We're still going to try and take care of our brothers and sisters out here because we love you guys and we care about you, and many of us come from the same units that you do. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to make sure that that was said because it is a real issue up here, and it's a real problem that needs to be addressed. Thank you guys so much for showing up today, and I hope that we can continue to work with this group and others to offer veterans amazing care. Thank you.
Representative Ramirez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I first want to say thank you to Commander Borland and to the veterans of foreign wars, the hardworking men and women who are here today, and you represent thousands and thousands across the country. I said last week in hearing that I've had the honor and opportunity for about 13 years before I went into policy work to run a social service agency working with people experiencing homelessness. And it was at that really young age when I started as the mail lady before I became the director there many years later that I was shocked to see the number of veterans that walked into that shelter, needing housing, needing access to mental health services, needing jobs, and certainly looking to be able to identify ways to be able to live in society supported and loved. And yet, this is the reality for so many of them. So I just want to deeply express my gratitude to everything that you do. We should recognize that we have a moral obligation to support and care for those who have served our country, and we have to continue to empower our veterans to live high quality, dignified lives. Am I right? So, as the VA continues to become a provider of choice for women veterans, the VA must ensure that women veterans have access to healthcare settings that support appropriate care, especially for those recovering from military sexual trauma or interpersonal violence. The VA must promote its Stop Harassment and White Ribbon campaigns to eliminate sexual assault and harassment at all VA facilities and promote strategies for recovery. Systems for processing MST-related claims need to be reformed. That includes knowledgeable and sensitive staff for resolving discrepancies in the approval of claims for residual effects and MST compared with other assault or PTSD claims. Commander Borland, national data reveal that about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 50 men have responded yes when asked if they've experienced military sexual trauma or MST. What do you think are some steps that Congress can take to ensure that service members with MST claims are handled respectfully by the VA?
Well, first of all, thank you for your concerns about women's health and women's concerns. My mom served 20 years in the United States Army. I used to get picked on all the time in high school about my mom wearing combat boots. I go, that's right, she wears combat boots. And I loved my mom very much for what she did with her service. I have seen, as a leader in the United States Army after 28 years of sexual harassment, especially deployed soldiers overseas. There is a perfect person on this panel right now that is near and dear to her heart. I picked Deborah Johnson out of California to be my legislative chairman because she runs a homeless home in California, Bakersfield, California. I would like Deborah to respond to this question. Deborah?
Thank you. So kind of like we're talking about two issues that we're paralleling side by side. One of them is military sexual trauma with women veterans and homelessness, which often goes hand in hand. How we can approach that with women is we have to increase awareness and education. We know with the passage of the Deborah Sampson Act that there's been a lot of changes that have been made, including the formation of the Women Veterans Call Center. But if you ask any female in this room how many of them knew that there is a Women Veterans Call Center, not one person during this conference knew about it until I talked to them about it. So we have got to do a better way to let women veterans be aware that the VA is taking our concerns seriously. Whether it is our health care, whether it is issues with military sexual trauma and mental health, if we do not do a better job getting out and reaching out to the women who are both enrolled in VA health care and those not enrolled in VA health care, we are going to see this issue perpetuate. So we want Congress to be held accountable, the VA to be held accountable, to teach us, to educate us, to get to community-based veteran service organizations in the places that we frequent every single day to give us the information that we need, the security that is needed, and the compassion that is needed to care for us.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Miller-Meeks, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank all of our organizations, witnesses that are here today. And then as a 24-year Army veteran, I just want to say thank you to our Iowa people who are here. I see the Whitmores in the audience. My husband served in the same reserve unit with Patty Whitmore. And I also want to specifically thank Patty for all of her unrelenting advocacy and advancement for women veterans, so thank you very much. I have concerns about the PACT Act, not from the standpoint of how we treat our veterans, but from things that veterans in my district and veterans across the nation are concerned about. And so I would just ask our panelists briefly, do you all consider a telehealth visit the same or synonymous with an in-person visit? If you could just yes or no throughout. Okay. Thank you. That's what I conveyed to Secretary McDonough this morning. And to separate out that data so we have that data on wait times, whether the visit's a telehealth visit or an in-person visit. And part of that's an age-related thing as well. But as a doctor, I can tell you that people have different and mixed feelings about it. Can you describe to me, what your thoughts are as we implement the PACT Act? So this are going to be a lot of people now newly eligible for care at the VA. And we have, as I think Chairman Boss mentioned in his opening statement, we still have ongoing issues after a decade with the implementation of electronic health records. So your thoughts on your experience, your members' experience with electronic health records, and are we doing enough? Should we do more?
Thank you. First of all, the PACT Act is being implemented in the VA, and they're doing an outstanding job. As you heard in my testimony, over 100,000 claims have already been rated. One of them were mine. Now, as far as the health records go, it's an old system. They need to get on board like the military. We need to get an update system on these health records. And to add more value to this, I am going to call upon our brand new, as of March 1st, Executive Director of the DC office, Ryan Gallucci.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief. And really with the electronic health record, our recommendation is that VA needs to take its governance of this program seriously. If you look at why this program has failed, and you look at the parallels with Department of Defense is 75% deployed across the force. The Commander-in-Chief and I recently sat down with clinicians both at Landstuhl and in Vicenza, Italy, who have been through the MHS Genesis transition stateside and are about to go through it when they deploy it overseas. They know what to anticipate. There is strong governance over DoD's process. And frankly, I'm tired of the excuses that are saying, well, the VA care system is so different from DoD. I'm sorry, DoD is about military readiness.
I need to reclaim my time, but thank you. And if the witnesses could submit in writing if they're experiencing difficulties with people trying to apply and to apply for benefits. And with that, I yield back.
Representative Luio, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This VFW member is proud to see you guys here today. Thank you. I know you do a heck of a lot for my fellow veterans day in and day out, at home, certainly here in Washington, so thank you. I see you. We're here for you. I want to respond to my colleague, a fellow Navy veteran, about cuts. This country has a sacred obligation to all of you, to all of us, to care for you. That is a bond that I will not have any part in breaking, and certainly not when we have a government that has billionaires and huge corporations who don't pay their fair share in taxes. So whatever is going to happen in our budget, over my dead body, does it come out of your care and our VA. I want that to be clear. Commander, a question for you. Your testimony, you talked about some struggles our fellow veterans have around community care, getting billed from outside providers, difficulties with scheduling. Could you talk a bit about those issues you've heard about? I certainly hear about them from our fellow veterans as well.
Thank you for that question. Actually, some issues that we're having is overseas. The Philippines, Korea, Europe. These veterans, when seeking health care, have to take it out of their own pocket and wait on a check to come to them, usually 3 to 6 months, and sometimes still waiting on this check. It's something that we are definitely looking into. We got to fix the problem because our veterans count. We got to help them out.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Dr. Murphy, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today, and most of all, really thank you for your service. I'm very blessed to serve the eastern coast of North Carolina. 1 in 7 of my constituents is a veteran. So it's a big deal for eastern North Carolina. Also have plenty active duty in Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point, New River Air Station, and a lot of individuals care about you guys. I've been a physician for 30 years and taken care of a lot of veterans, and actually I continue to take care of a lot of veterans. I will tell you, I thought the passage of the PACT Act, and specifically the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, was a great triumph for all veterans. I will say I'm very, very disappointed in the amount of fees that attorneys are going to get because of that. I've had people say they were in South Carolina, Oregon, Manila, and they were seeing ads for attorneys for these things. We're going to try to have to do something about that because it shouldn't be taken out of your pockets and you're paying your medical bills to pay attorneys' fees. I'm sorry, I just feel very strongly about that. I just would like to say something. Just put this in your hat and think about it. The VA in 2021 spent $233 billion in health care for 9 million enrollees. Compare that to Britain, to the English healthcare system that spent $308 billion for 67 million enrollees. So the VA spends 5 times as much per person as the British healthcare system. and think about the problems that you have with the VA system. You know, I've heard some comments about we want to privatize the VA system. I've worked in private practice medicine for 30 years. There's a hell of a lot the VA can learn from private practice. And the fact that you guys have problems getting in, getting referrals, is an absolute slap in the face. It is more government bureaucracy. This is the problem where some of our colleagues feel that just throwing more money at something does something better. No, the system and the processes need to change. You don't deserve that. When you need to be seen, you need to be seen. And lastly, I'll end upon this. Since my days in the state legislature, PTSD and TBI and its subsequent link to suicide has been a great concern of mine. I know that we reach the end of our rope some days with medications and behavioral therapies. I'm a big fan of hyperbaric oxygen. I know in the medical field it is slightly controversial, but I will say this: the VA needs to take that and make sure it is available to veterans when you literally have no other hope. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a specific question, just statements. Thank you. I'll yield back.
Representative Rattlewagon, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Acting Ranking Member Brownlee. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today, and I want to thank the VSOs for making this trip here to D.C. every year. A special aloha to the Hawaii delegation. My question is for Commander-in-Chief Borland. The VFW has expressed support for the GUARD Act, of which I'm an original sponsor, co-sponsor. Some of the benefits companies that would be affected by the bill have stated that they provide veterans a choice and fill a need that isn't being met. They claim that they only have the best of intentions when it comes to helping vets receive their benefits. Old adages about good intentions aside, could you please describe what sort of safeguards VFW and other VSOs have in place for representing vets with their benefits claims? And why is it so important to have a formal accreditation process? In your opinion, is there anything Congress can do to ensure that there are enough accredited reps to meet the population's needs?
Great question. And by the way, thank you for co-sponsoring the GUARD Act. The GUARD Act is near and dear to the veterans of foreign wars. We do not support predatory sharks, claim sharks out there taking money from our veterans. We believe that the accredited service officer that provides free medical care for our veterans is critical. What we would like Congress to do is push this act forward and get it passed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Representative Rosendale, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you, Commander Borland and the rest of the VFW for being here with us today. We really do appreciate the meetings that we've had over the last couple of weeks, and I would certainly appreciate the attendance here of my delegation from Montana, especially well. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about these issues that Congress can and should do to help our veterans. One of the most important things that we can do as policymakers is to help our veterans is not to send them into conflicts unless it is essential for the national defense. Unfortunately, over the past 25 years, Congress has failed in this regard. It's our obligation to secure our nation and to put the American people first, not to send our sons and daughters overseas to participate in a conflict that does not serve our national interest. In your testimony, you point out that suicide prevention is not simply a clinical priority and should not be viewed as such, Commander Borland, and I appreciate that. I served for several years on a board for a private nonprofit mental health agency and saw a full spectrum of mental health conditions, okay? Can you please elaborate on your comments?
Sir, suicide prevention in the VA right now is more linked to mental health than it should be. It shouldn't just be in mental health. It needs to be abroad. It needs to be out in the whole entire VA system. We need more data. We need to know what these individuals are going through. We need to know what they're dealing with. We don't want to get into their private lives. We don't want to get into their private business. Mental health is a very private and individual's concern that doesn't need to be spread worldwide. What we're concerned about is trying to prevent suicide. And the more that we know, the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the VA as a whole knows about suicide prevention, the better. We need to take care of our veterans, period.
So I agree with that. It has always been my belief, and we are now starting to get the Veterans Administration to recognize this, to treat the individual holistically, to look at their diet, to look at other elements that they may be suffering from so that we can drill down and find out what is causing these other problems. And so we're on the same page. I also appreciate the different organizations that have been trying to meet the veteran where they are and treat that. I personally have participated in the Warriors and Quiet Waters program, fly fishing for veterans. I participated in the Wounded Warriors program because each individual addresses their needs in a different way. Are there any suggestions that you could recommend to this committee?
I think what you just used as examples is an outstanding thing. We have a lot of things. We have camping for soldiers, fishing for soldiers, anything that can take a soldier, well, I'm saying soldiers because I was Army, so apologize, for service members. Anything for service members leaving the armed forces today, especially with mental health issues, to get their minds off of combat, to get their minds off of suicide, to get their minds off of being guilty, survivor's guilt, for God's sakes. Some military service members leaving the service today have survived situations where they've lost partners, they've lost their own men and women, and significant things have happened. These programs that we offer outside the VA system is needed for these. It's like a peer-to-peer kind of thing. Get them out with other individuals that are dealing with the same thing, and get them out doing some things that will keep their minds clear and free.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Welcome.
Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. And Commander, thank you, and I want to thank the VFW for being here today and to share your views, and I want to thank the audience members for coming in from all corners of the U.S. today. And as I said off the start, you know, this room is full and 2 overflow rooms are full, and we thank you for being here. Now, just so you know, I'm going to ask a special favor before I dismiss this panel. We have our next group that's coming in, and many of them are disabled veterans, including our blind veterans. If you would, if everybody could, while leaving, use the back door back here, that will put the flow this way and be respectful of our other veterans and make sure that we have a big crowd, and it's great to have you here. And let me tell you, from the years of COVID, it is so good to actually have you here in person. And so, Commander, the first panel is excused, and we will now recess briefly to bring in the witnesses for the second panel. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And it is, and the
Want to go ahead and take seats, please? We want to welcome to our second panel, and thank you for being here. And thanks to everyone for switching out so quickly. Much like the NCAA basketball tournaments, you know, people in, people out, new ones hit the court. You know, I know we have a lot to hear from this panel, so I want to get right to it. Today we'll be joined by Colonel Nelson Millets of Jewish Veterans of the USA, Lieutenant General Mitchell Lennington of the Wounded Warriors Project, Ms. Bonnie Carroll of Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, Mr. Corey Titus of the Military Officers Association of America, Commander Donald McLean of the American Veterans, and Ms. Tamara Sipes of the Gold Star Wives of America, Commander Christopher Vedbeck of Military Order of the Purple Heart, and Mr. Joseph McNeil of the Blind Veterans Association, and Mr. Michael McLaughlin of the National Association of County Veterans Service Officers. Again, welcome to all of you and all of your members in the audience for being here today. Thank you for what you do every day in support of our veterans and their families. Colonel Millets, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Tester and both ranking members Moran and Takano, veterans in the audience, veterans sitting in Congress, veterans at this table. It's my honor to serve. And sir, I heard you say that before, and I 100% agree. We serve not only in the military, but we serve as veterans. I have served 32 years in the United States Air Force, enlisted and as an officer. I enlisted in 1970, served Vietnam through Iraq, 2005, 2006 in Iraq. That was my last assignment. The reason I say this is not to make myself sound good, but when I left the military originally after the Vietnam War, I went to the VA, and I didn't go back a second time for a lot of years. The VA has improved, has substantially improved. They're wonderful now in many areas. It's because of what the VSOs have done, what you have done in Congress. Thank you for that. I have the privilege and the honor to represent the Jewish War Veterans as the 91st National Commander. The Jewish War Veterans is the oldest national veterans organization in the United States. We were formed in 1896 by a few veterans from the Civil War. The reason we were formed is because of anti-Semitism. Again, we're the longest serving veteran service organization. We advocate for all veterans, not just Jewish veterans, but for all veterans, for benefits and services. And we've been doing that for at least 127 years. In fact, we'll be celebrating our 127th anniversary next week on March 15th. Our mission is strong and clear, fighting for military and veterans benefits and services, advocating on behalf of Jewish veterans, Catholic, women, African Americans, Asians, all veterans. I want to emphasize that. You can hear in our name, Jewish War Veterans. Anti-Semitism is one of our prime areas because anti-Semitism has raised its ugly head worse than it's ever been in my lifetime in the United States. We oppose all forms of discrimination, but we concentrate especially, and we're outspoken on anti-Semitism. Jewish War Veterans officials participate in roundtables, events stating our position. And at those events and roundtables, we often hear people say negative things about African Americans, about Asians. We will defend the right of everybody in this United States, and we will continue to do so. We want to point out that recently, because of anti-Semitism, we were able to obtain Medal of Honor, processing it through this difficult Army process, for William Sherman and Tibor Rubin. We also helped with African Americans being processed for their Medal of Honors. As anti-Semitism continues to grow in the United States, JWV asks you, Congress members, to specifically help defend our country's freedoms and go forward and fight anti-Semitism and all forms of hate and bigotry wherever it exists. Key to that, in our opinion at JWV, is educating the U.S. citizens. We have priorities for the 118th Congress, and I've sat through the VFW presentations. I'm not going to repeat what they say. I've gone through the C-SPAN for the American Legion and many others. I thank you for sitting there and listening to a lot of things repeatedly, but you know they're important to you, they're important to us. But I will emphasize a few things that I think are important not only to JWV, but to you, and we haven't really mentioned them to the extent I think is necessary. We know the PACT Act was instrumental when you passed it. It took a lot of pressure. It didn't just take 1 year for the VSOs to put the pressure on Congress members. It took many years. Please keep that in mind for future efforts. But with the PACT Act, we also know that VA started working on hiring people, organizing to address the 3.5 million new claims that they estimate will be filed. But yet it's not enough. I know there's some bills going through Congress right now that say give more money to doctors, nurses, administrators at VA. We need to push those bills through the system. Because if we don't have those people in place, the claims will increase, and then the appeals will increase continuously. Yes, we address toxic exposure by the PACT Act. Do all the veterans out there know about their benefits? The VSOs and Congress have to stand out. Make sure they know those benefits. Know that they can apply for the benefits. Put claims in. You addressed in a previous meeting the predator lawyers. Yes, JWV agrees with veterans of foreign wars. Penalties should be applied to those people. But there should also be incentives for additional veteran services officers to come out, to be employed by the organizations like the Jewish War Veterans. Yes, we're increasing our program and trying to recruit as many VSOs as possible to process those claims, and we will do that. Suicide prevention and mental health. We obviously know more must be done. We know that one veteran, one military member taking their life is too much. But everything I've heard over all these many panels, all these many hearings, didn't address what happens in the military before you get to the veteran side. I think from day one that you join the military, you should be addressing in the military mental health. When you go through basic training, that is extremely important to address it. I think maybe even before that, and we work with an organization called Our Community Salutes, who actually works with the families of the veterans, of the military members rather, that are going into the military directly at a high school. Fantastic organization. And if you have any questions about that during that period of time, I'd be happy to answer it. Supporting women veterans. The fastest growing group of veterans, as you know, is women. It's haphazard. I've visited many veterans locations, many Veterans Affairs medical centers, and some are great. The one that I go to in Philadelphia is fantastic, addressing women's needs. But that might be because the director is a woman. I don't know. I've gone to others, and that's not the case. It needs to be looked at, not as a total VA package, but individual centers. Expanding services to veterans and caregivers. Again, we know this is important. The one area we want to stress is JWV urges Congress to remove the regulatory requirement for the 70% disability rating to be eligible for this program. That's ridiculous. And that's my words. Take it out. It wasn't there before. Take it out. Major Richard Starr Act. Committee Chairman Tester, thank you for heading up that effort, and there are others. In New Jersey, where I come from, we have gone to all our senators, all our congresspeople, and they have signed on. We have encouraged all the JWV members to go to the 50 states and territories and get their senators and congresspeople to also sign on. It impacts over 50,000 combat injured veterans. Ending veterans homelessness. We've made progress. Between 2020 and 2022, 11% of the veterans that were on the street are no longer homeless. Best we've done in 5 years. The problem is that that's not good enough. JWV has submitted to many of you members just last week steps that we should take that you haven't really discussed before. I don't have time in my short period of time here to go over them, but I encourage you to look at that, and I'd be happy during the questions and answers to answer some questions. Fixing the electronic system, and I'll be very quick with this, and only one other item after this. I worked for the IRS for 11 years. During the period of time, they put their new tax-based database in place. We did a better job than VA's doing. What's going on here? Less money. Yes, we made some mistakes at first, but we now have tax returns coming in from more than 65 million taxpayers. What's VA talking about? Maximum 12 million with the new PACT Act. Please do oversight on this. I don't know what the problem is. We don't need any more research. We need implementation. And go back to DOD, like was said by VFW. You need to start the process with DOD and not just be isolated. And I know there's committees that talk to each other between VA and DOD, but they're not doing what we need. Conclusion. We started out in the military, most of us volunteered. We served our country. Now we're veterans and we're still volunteering. Everybody on this table is a volunteer. Many of you are volunteers in Veteran Services Organization. We continue to serve. Call on us. We could help you. And we love this nation. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Colonel. I would ask that all the panelists understand we have a lot of panelists. I want to have as much respect as I can for our veterans, but that's why we're here, is to hear you. But please, we're trying to keep it to 5 minutes, each one of us. With that, we recognize General Linnington for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, ranking members, distinguished committee members, thank you for today's hearing. And for the warriors sitting behind me in the black shirts, thank you for taking the time and making the effort to be with us today. My remarks today will be brief, capturing the highlights of our extensive written testimony submitted last week and in support of our 2023 legislative priorities. To provide some broader context behind three of our highest priorities, I'll start by saying that this year will mark the 20th anniversary of Wounded Warrior Project as an organization. Committed to our mission to honor and empower wounded warriors, their families, and those that support them. Our priorities this year are very much a reflection of how we serve today and how we've grown over the last 20 years. As the first wounded, ill, and injured return home from the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, Wounded Warrior Project was present at military hospitals with backpacks filled with simple comfort items like socks, shirts, CD players, and other comfort items. With those backpacks came a promise to be with our warriors throughout their recovery, no matter how long it took. Today, we support wounded, ill, and injured veterans by connecting them with innovative programs and services in a variety of areas, including mental and brain health care, tackling the signature wounds of the past 20 years of war, as TBI, PTSD, depression, and anxiety remain the most prevalent self-reported challenges our alumni face. It's why last year, Wounded Warrior Project provided warriors and family members with nearly 55,000 hours of treatment for these and other mental health conditions, and part of why we hosted more than 6,400 events across the country to help keep warriors and families connected and help ensure they never have to face these challenges alone. When warriors reach out to us, two of the biggest impediments to care is that it can take too long to make a mental health care appointment, or that once you've found a provider and begin to develop trust, the provider leaves and it's time to start over. To address these problems, we call on Congress to pass the VA Careers Act and the Mental Health Professionals Workforce Shortage Loan Repayment Act. The first would help VA recruit and retain more mental health providers, while the latter would address the fact that mental health isn't just a veteran concern, it's a national concern, and we simply need to get more providers into the field. Of course, veterans' needs go beyond mental health. To better understand how we serve, or how to serve, we needed to talk to those whom we serve. Our annual Warrior Survey, initiated in 2010, is today in its 13th year and is the largest, most comprehensive survey of post-9/11 wounded veterans in the nation. Across a decade of survey administration, we've come to realize the results of these surveys can go beyond the direct services and programs we provide by shaping public policy to better the lives of all American veterans. It's why we shaped our survey to learn more about the impact of military toxic exposures. In 2019, when we first found out that only 9% of warriors who reported exposure to burn pits in service had been treated for their exposure at the Department of Veterans Affairs, we made addressing toxic wounds a legislative priority. It's why we were one of many champions of the Honoring Our PAC Act, and why we are so grateful to stand before you today and thank you for the largest expansion of veteran health care and benefits in decades. Now that Congress has delivered, we call upon Congress to ensure the VA has the resources, the training, and the staff they need to help the PAC Act make the generational impact we all intended. As a final point, I'll say that Wounded Warrior Project began in 2003, serving dozens of recently injured service members, most of them combat wounded and very young, and surviving catastrophic battlefield wounds. Many would have a whole life ahead of them, and Wounded Warrior Project was there to help navigate through the earliest days of healing, while promising we'd be there to help them with whatever they needed in the months and years to come. Today, among more than 185,000 registered warriors, the average age is now 41 years old. 17% of our alumni are women. 4 in 10 have obtained a bachelor's degree, and 60% still have at least one child remaining in the household. Our alumni are closely reflective of the larger U.S. population, and like many Americans, many have been struggling financially over the last year. Two of the more striking findings in our 2022 annual Warrior Survey were 64% of warriors reported not having the financial means to make ends meet at least once the past calendar year, and 2 in 5 are food insecure. As well, 50% of our Warrior alumni have at least $20,000 in non-mortgage debt. For these reasons, Congress should join us in prioritizing financial well-being among our veterans. And the most significant request in this context is to pass the Major Richard Starr Act, which would end the offset of military retirement pay against VA disability compensation for veterans who were medically retired for combat-related injuries before they reach 20 years of retirement. We believe these are distinct earned benefits. One should not be offset by the other. In closing, I want to thank the committee for this invitation to testify, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. I would like to now... Ms. Carroll, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, and distinguished members of the Senate and House Committees on Veterans Affairs and the surviving family members gathered here today. The Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors is grateful for the opportunity to share issues of importance to the 100,000 plus surviving veteran family members of all ages, representing all services, and with losses from all causes of death, who TAPS is honored to serve. A top legislative priority for TAPS and the survivor community is ensuring surviving spouses are allowed to retain their benefits upon remarriage at any age. Current law penalizes surviving spouses if they remarry before age 55. Given that most post-9/11 surviving spouses are widowed in their 20s and 30s, we are asking these widows or widowers to wait over 20 years to remarry should they be so fortunate to find love again. Surviving spouses should not have to choose between remarrying and financial security. They will always be the widow or widower of a fallen hero, regardless of their future marital status. TAPS is proud to have worked with Ranking Member Moran, Senator Warnock, Representative Phillips, and Hudson on the Love Lives On Act of 2023, and we urge its swift passage. TAPS and the survivor community have also supported strengthening dependency and indemnity compensation for many years. Stringent limitations on DAC payments to survivors impact their ability to pay for their housing, transportation, child care, food, and medical care. TAPS strongly supports the Caring for Our Survivors Act of 2023 and thanks Chairman Tester, Senator Bozeman, Representatives Hayes and Fitzpatrick for reintroducing this important legislation. Raising DIC from 43 to 55% of the compensation rate paid to a 100% disabled veteran will provide parity with other federal survivor benefits. The sacrifice of our nation's surviving families should not be considered less than their civilian counterparts receiving federal benefits, and we urge passage of this critical legislation to finally address this injustice. TAPS is proud of the leadership role we played, along with fellow veteran and military service organizations, to ensure passage of the bipartisan Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act of 2022. As a leading voice for the families of those who have died as a result of illnesses connected to their exposure to toxins while serving, and a founding member of the Toxic Exposure in the American Military Coalition, TAPS thanks Chairman Tester and Bost and Ranking Members Moran and Takano of this committee and their professional staffs for your leadership in passing this historic bill. We're committed to working with Congress and the VA to ensure proper implementation of the PACT Act. The VA has been working hard to encourage veterans and survivors to file PACT Act-related claims. To date, more than 300,000 veterans and survivor claims have been filed. The VA estimates there are 382,000 potential survivors who may be eligible for PACT Act-related benefits. TAPS is committed to partnering with the VA to increase outreach and education, especially to those impacted survivors, encouraging them to submit claims so that they may receive the benefits they deserve. TAPS thanks Congress for passing the Expanding the Families of Veterans Access to Mental Health Services Act. TAPS strongly believes that expanding vet center eligibility to include survivors of a veteran loved one who has died by suicide will save lives by helping decrease these survivors' risks for post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. TAPS has become increasingly alarmed by the growing rate of opioid dependence and opioid-related deaths among veterans, service members, and their families. According to a study funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, opioid overdoses among veterans has increased by 93%. The Department of Defense recently released data confirming that fentanyl was involved in 52% of overdose cases in the military between 2017 and 2021. Fatal fentanyl overdoses more than doubled during that time. TAPS will continue to work with Congress, the VA, and the DoD to raise awareness of this growing epidemic and the need to include family members in opioid and fentanyl addiction treatment plans to facilitate whole family recovery. On behalf of our veteran survivor community, the families of America's fallen heroes, and on behalf of my family, I thank you for the opportunity to testify and look forward to our questions.
Thank you. Ms. Titus, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman Boston, Tester, and Ranking Members Takano and Moran. On behalf of the Military Officers Association of America, thank you for the opportunity to present our major veterans legislative priorities. Our 350,000 members work to advocate for all veterans, service members, their families, and survivors. We offer our heartfelt appreciation for the leadership and arduous work of the committee members and all of their teams. Over the past decade, the Veterans Affairs Committees have championed major legislation like the Mission Act, laws supporting women veterans, mental health, suicide prevention, and many other bills, all of which need to be fully implemented. On top of this, the 117th Congress accomplished something historic with the passage of the Honoring Our Pact Act. The PACT Act means health care and benefits for 3.5 million more veterans and more stress on VA's workforce and infrastructure. Continuing resolutions impede the department's ability to fulfill our promises. The VA needs timely and predictable funding to implement this historic legislation and other congressionally mandated bills. If the VA is going to meet the needs of veterans in the coming years and decades, we must modernize its physical and workforce infrastructure. Aging infrastructure and workforce vacancies prevent VA from modernizing its healthcare and benefits systems. For these reasons and others, implementing the PACT Act will be harder than passing it. We applaud VA's outreach efforts to help veterans become aware of the expansion of healthcare and benefits. The initial workload increases reported by VA show that veterans have filed over 300,000 claims. And while we make strides in some areas, we find gaps in others. One example, the core purpose of a presumptive condition is to help fill evidentiary gaps in a veteran's record that they cannot fill on their own. But a month after the PACT Act was signed into law, a GAO report found that VA granted only 8% of Agent Orange claims for nerve damage, skin cysts, and blistering. We need Congress to ensure a grant rate better than 8%. MOA recommends Congress add strict reporting requirements to ensure effective oversight of grant rates for these conditions. If Congress or the VA create a presumption, we must ensure it works as intended. In 2020, to increase our understanding of presumptions related to toxic exposures, MOA and the Disabled American Veterans started a bottom-up review of toxic exposure presumptions. The progress and then ultimate success of the PACT Act led us to refocus our work. Our upcoming report will offer findings and recommendations to build on the PACT Act, so we never have to pass a bill of this magnitude again. While the PACT Act was comprehensive, it was not complete. One of the striking insights from our work was that it takes VA an average of 3 decades to acknowledge toxic exposures. This is not a formal concession, mind you, which could help veterans with their claims. This is simply saying an exposure may have happened. Delaying acknowledgement slows every other aspect of toxic exposure presumptions to the detriment of harmed veterans and their families. Our work with DAV will offer recommendations on how DoD and VA can get upstream of future toxic exposure problems. MOA and DAV look forward to briefing you and your staff on this report after it is released. In addition to addressing toxic exposure concerns, MOA would like to stress the need to support our reserve component. During the peak of the pandemic, the National Guard saw activation levels not seen since World War II, and the strain is showing. Recruiting numbers for 5 of the past 6 years for reserve component branches, for 5 of the 6 reserve component branches, they missed the recruiting goals in 2022. This is a continuation of a long trend. 2 essential areas under the Veterans Affairs Committee's jurisdiction where you can help are service member consumer protections and education benefits. When it comes to consumer protections, SICRA and USERA are vital for our national security. First, we ask Congress to end the practice of pre-dispute forced arbitration for these protections. Next, a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau report found very few eligible Guard and Reserve service members received their SICRA interest rate reductions. Only 10% of eligible auto loans and 6% of personal loans received lower rates, costing service members an estimated $100 million between 2007 and 2018. When less than 10% of eligible troops are receiving a benefit, we must re-examine how we implement that benefit. Finally, MOA supports the principle that every day of service should count towards earned benefits. Unfortunately, that is not the case for all service members. MOA supports GI Bill parity for the reserve component to ensure recognition for their hard work. Thank you for the opportunity to present MOA's priorities. We look forward to working with you, the VA, to better the lives of those who serve this country faithfully. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Tester, Chairman Boss, to members of your committees. My name is Don McLean. I'm a 32-year Coast Guard veteran from the great state of Massachusetts. I am honored to be here today on behalf of the largest veteran service organization representing all of America's veterans. AMVETS is honored to provide our legislative priorities for the 118th Congress. This past Congress, legislators and veteran service organizations came together to enact significant change for veterans and their families. The PACT Act was no small feat and will result in ensuring that veterans of numerous generations receive the health care and benefits that they earned with their blood, sweat, and tears. We are grateful to the committees for your efforts in getting this legislation across the finish line. AMVETS was honored to host our VSO brothers and sisters, as well as Jon Stewart, at our second annual Rolling to Remember Pro-Veterans Demonstration Ride here in Washington, D.C. This is the nation's largest veterans event, which brings together tens of thousands of veterans and supporters from across the United States, riding their motorcycles on Memorial Day weekend to highlight critical issues. First, to demand continued and increased action for the more than 82,000 service members still missing in action, as well as raise awareness of the many veterans who die by suicide each day. And lastly, of course, to highlight our collective efforts to support the PACT Act. This year's event will take place May 28th, 2023. We will never forget our POWs and MIAs, and we won't stop fighting for real solutions to the suicide crisis. We will continue this incredible platform until they all come home and all who make it home are well. The lasting impact of the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan continues to plague our veterans and the many Afghani refugees who were fortunate enough to get out of the country, as well as those we abandoned. We owe it to these repatriated men and women to help them get on their feet, and we ask that Congress prioritize for their sake and for our men and women in uniform struggling with our unconscionable exit. The 117th Congress can be summed up as providing significant investments in veterans' health care and benefits who are exposed to toxic exposures. Senator Gillibrand going on a personal and heroic crusade to ensure substantial and overdue changes were made to ensure sexual predators are held accountable in military service. Congress coming up short for our Afghani brothers and sisters, and Congress altogether dropping the ball again as it relates to veterans and service members' wellness and a significant reduction in suicide. The rate of suicide has only gotten worse, and we need not Congress to focus on this issue until we get effective programs and outcomes. AMVET's primary legislative goals for the 118th Congress are as follows. Encourage hearings, roundtables, and funding focused on new and novel programs to increase veterans and service members' mental health and wellness as a form of suicide reduction. To pass legislation allowing all congressionally chartered 501c19 nonprofit organizations to receive tax-deductible donations. Increase women's voices in policy and government to address issues disproportionately affecting them. Support immediate passage of the Major Richard Starr Act. Bolster recruitment and retention at the VA by passing the Careers Act. Support the completion of a successful and seamless electronic health care record. Pass legislation that provides a meaningful increase in DIC for survivors while striking arcane and unethical remarriage penalties. Create a national veterans strategy to align care and benefits to focus on outcomes and success. AMVETS is honored to have the opportunity to present our views and opinions to Congress. We understand that we are proposing some significant changes in moving toward a VA of the future. We look forward to continuing our work in this Congress and stand at the ready to continue pressing on the many issues facing our veterans. We will always continue our work to create better policies for the veterans we serve.
Thank you. Ms. Ipe, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, distinguished chairman and members of the Joint Senate and House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I am honored to be here today to testify on behalf of Gold Star Wives of America as the national president, to share a few stories and challenges facing our surviving spouses in this great nation. My husband, PO1 Robert Sipes, was killed while stationed at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island in Washington State on October 8, 1995. He was 34 and I was 28. As a search and rescue corpsman, my husband flew over 55 missions, saving lives, and was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism. But most importantly, he was my loving husband and father of 3 when he was killed. Gold Star Wives was founded in 1945 and works to ensure surviving spouses of our fallen heroes receive the benefits they are entitled to and are treated with dignity and respect. It is with this mission that we present highlights of our legislative goals. The most critical issue for surviving spouses is increasing VA dependency and indemnity compensation, DIC, which is the benefit surviving spouses receive when a service member or veteran dies due to their service. Currently, surviving spouses receive 43% of the compensation a veteran rated 100% disabled receives. So, if someone works for a federal agency and dies because of their job, their surviving spouse is eligible for up to 55% of their compensation. This is a significant disparity. DIC on its own is not enough to support the totality of expenses facing surviving spouses. Those living on a fixed income are extremely vulnerable to poverty, especially considering the current rate of inflation. An increase in DIC is the right thing to do. Member Sherry Briley of Arkansas, with us today, lost her husband, CW3 Donovan Briley, a Black Hawk helicopter pilot who died October 3, 1993 in Mogadishu, Somalia. Donovan called home prior to the mission, and she missed his call. Sherry and their daughter never got to say goodbye. This is the kind of sacrifice our men and women in uniform and their families make every day. We are so grateful for the work of Chairman Tester, Senator Bozeman, and Representatives Hayes and Fitzpatrick for introducing the Caring for Survivors Act of 2023. This bill will ensure that military surviving spouses are able to live with dignity and respect, knowing their sacrifice is not viewed as less than by our country. Shortly after my husband died, I remember walking the halls of Naval Air Station Whidbey Island in a fog with an infant, toddler, and child in tow, trying to navigate benefits. At a TRICARE window, the receptionist looked at my ID, which showed an unremarried widow, then looked at my kids and me and said, "Don't ever remarry. If you do, you'll lose your benefits and you will never get them back." Today, under the current law, if a surviving spouse remarries before the age of 55, we forfeit life-saving benefits. Less than 8% of the total DIC recipients are under the age of 55. A remarriage doesn't void the loss. The burden and trauma continue forever. In addition, the definition of a surviving spouse for VA purposes was last updated in 1962. Quoting one phrase from that law, "has not held himself or herself out openly to the public to be the spouse of such other person." This phrase causes great conflict for surviving spouses. An anonymous member from Charleston, South Carolina said, "No surviving spouse should be afraid of retribution for continuing their lives when they've sacrificed so much. It's been 18 years and I have been hesitant to be involved in any meaningful relationship for fear it would be construed as holding myself out to be married. This has deeply negatively impacted my children and me." The law should not be ambiguous. We believe the definition should be updated to follow federal and state laws. In closing, we were inspired to see the passage of the PACT Act at the end of the last Congress. We are grateful the VA will be reviewing previously denied DIC claims for many surviving spouses who had been informed their spouse's death was not related to their service or their DIC claim had been denied. We appreciate the VA's efforts to provide regular updates and educational events regarding the PACT Act rollout. Gold Star Wives wholeheartedly thanks the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committee for your time and attention to these issues of vital importance. We look forward to working with the committees in any way we can to move these priorities forward. I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to now recognize Mr. Vedvik for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Chairman Boston Tester, ranking members Moran and Takano, and esteemed members of the committees, on behalf of the approximately 50,000 members of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, it is my honor and privilege to appear before you today. As I'm sure you're aware, the MOPH is a unique organization in that our membership is comprised entirely of veterans who were wounded in combat. First organized in 1932 and chartered by Congress in 1958, the MOPH stands today as a preeminent veteran service organization for combat wounded veterans. Before I touch on a few of our legislative priorities, I would like to express our appreciation to Congress for its invaluable assistance with the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023, Section 584, enhanced information related to the awarding of the Purple Heart. As you're aware, the Purple Heart is earned with blood and never won. It is a medal of high esteem that is presented to our brave service members who have been wounded or killed in combat, spilling their blood in the name of freedom. For over 2 centuries, this distinguished award has been a symbol of courage and sacrifice. However, the process of awarding and tracking the Purple Heart has not always been perfect. There have been cases where service members who deserved the medal did not receive it due to administrative oversight or errors, or in cases where the medal was awarded, but the recipient or their families were not made aware. Thanks to the efforts of Congress, these issues have been addressed in Section 584 of the NDAA. This section requires DoD to maintain an accurate database of all service members who have been wounded or killed in combat, ensuring that the process of tracking the Purple Heart is transparent. The MOPH recognizes the hard work and dedication that went into drafting and passing this legislation. Thank you all for your steadfast support in honoring Purple Heart recipients. We would also like to thank the families of our fallen heroes whose sacrifices will forever be honored by this important legislation. It was great to see significant legislation like the PACT Act and others that help our country's veterans in this past year help bring together various VSOs. Not one organization can do it alone. We're thankful for the opportunities to continue to partner with you and other organizations, increasing the collective strength and effect all VSOs are having on the veteran population. A piece of legislation that could have a tremendous impact on the lives of wounded veterans is the Major Richard Starr Act. It is one that numerous VSOs have spoken to you about, and we are proud to join that chorus. It aims to address the major injustice in our military retirement system. Currently, veterans who are retired and have combat-related injuries receive only a portion of their earned retirement pay. The Major Richard Starr Act seeks to rectify the situation by changing the way retirement pay is calculated for these veterans. If passed, this bill would ensure that veterans who are medically retired due to combat-related injuries are given the retirement pay they have earned. As an organization that represents the interests of wounded veterans, we believe that this bill is essential to ensuring that our nation's heroes receive the pay they dutifully earned in support of our country. We urge Congress to pass this bill and honor the sacrifices of those who served our country by providing them the retirement pay they gave so much for. On this International Women's Day, I think it's appropriate to talk about something that affects a lot of female veterans, military sexual trauma. Military sexual trauma has been an ongoing problem in the United States military for far too long. The women who serve our country have been subjected to unthinkable acts of sexual assault and harassment, and the trauma they face can last a lifetime. These women have sacrificed for our country. It is our duty to provide them with the care and benefits they deserve. Unfortunately, many female veterans who experience MST have had difficulty accessing the care they need. They have reported difficulty getting mental health services, seeking help from the VA, and even experiencing homelessness. The MST Survivors Act and Deborah Sampson Act were significant steps forward into ensuring that the VA must address this issue of women's health and improve the VA's ability to care for these women. The VA has made strides in recent years to improve the care for female veterans, but there's so much more work to be done. We must invest in programs that reduce the stigma of reporting MST. As reporting increases, there will be an increased need for specialized care for female veterans who have experienced MST, especially in rural areas. Lastly, we must do more to prevent MST from occurring in the first place. We need to continue to strengthen the reporting and investigation processes and ensure that those who commit acts of sexual assault and harassment are held accountable for their actions. Chairman Tester and Boss, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, this concludes my statement. I thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. This time I would like to recognize Mr. McNeil for 5 minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman Tester, Boss, Ranking Members Moran, Takana, and other distinguished members of the Veteran Service Organization. I would like to point out that March 28th is Blinded Veterans Day. We, the BVA, are the only veteran service organizations that represent blind, low-vision veterans, their caregivers, and their family members. We hope that our legislative priorities for the 118th Congress will be looked upon favorably. And I have 3 things I would like to talk about in our testimony. I won't go over all of them, but ocular care, caregiver, and transportation. Under ocular care, September 2022, VA removed a specific line from the standardized episode of care, specifically in the eye guidelines, that stated evasive procedures that should be performed only by ophthalmologists has been removed. Our concern with that is, for decades, VA has been giving quality eye care, and now you've opened Pandora's box. There are 7 states that authorize other doctors that can do a procedure on your eye that's so invasive that you do not want, injections, lasers, or eye surgeries. We would like the oversight that you have VA return that language back to the standardized episode of care, SEOC, so that we won't have these episodes, because in the past, programs like this have cost the VA millions in dollars. I wouldn't want somebody telling me they learned how to do something on YouTube and they think they can do it. The eye is a very unforgiving organ. When we're talking about an injection or removing a cataract, we don't want that. We would love to have that language returned to it. Secondly, when we talk about caregiver, the program that was instituted and we brought to light last year, a lot has been done, but the problem is we're using cited guidelines against blind people. Our activities in daily living are totally different than what a sighted person has to do. The questions that the adjudicators are asking are flat out asinine and insulting to a blind person. We propose a standard of 5/200 in the worst eye and a field degree of 5 degrees, which is pretty much looking through a straw. If you have these standards for blind people, then there will be no questions when we have the adjudicators looking at us that we don't have these crazy questions that are being asked. Can he put food in his mouth? The question should be, can he properly prepare the meal or she prepare the meal? When we look at transportation, the problem with transportation is either unavailable, unreliable, or flat out non-existent. Part of the problem that the verbiage that's in there, the clerks are interpreting in their way and not the way it's supposed to read. It does say a blinded veteran can ride transportation under special mode of transportation. They want to add, we have to be in a wheelchair or on a gurney. I personally am not getting strapped to a gurney to go to an appointment. Then you're looking at who can authorize special mode of transportation, which is just clinicians, doctors, your PAs. We would like to have the VIS coordinator, who is our professional, who deals with us on a daily basis. She knows what our needs are to be able to authorize special mode of transportation. In addition, you're looking at the hindrance where they want some of us in some locations to schedule a ride 30 days out, 2 weeks out, and the day prior to your appointment, they call and tell you it's been canceled, you're gonna have to get to the best way you can. Now, what do we have? We've got to jump through hoops, we've got to get a family member, We got to reschedule. We have to flat out cancel. That's a barrier to our health care, timely health care that we need. We need the oversight to stop that. The verbiage in it that will put these clerks in their location so that the clerks and the managers are actually doing their job. Secondly, you're looking at when you go to turn your paperwork in to get reimbursed, it's not equitable. If we have to take an Uber to get there, then we need to be reimbursed for the full cost of the Uber. One of our members had to take a ride, it cost him $50. He's reimbursed $15. He needed to be reimbursed the entire. If the doctor authorizes it, then the VA needs to pay it. The other barrier, when you get the paperwork and you go to the clerk's office inside the facility, they will tell you they don't have time to help you fill it out. Go to the website. As everyone here knows, the website is not 508 compliant. So how do we do it if we're stuck in this cycle of circling around, chasing our tail, when they should fix it? What we propose is that until they fix the website, that blinded veterans are allowed to receive their reimbursement at location or told until they fix the website. I thank you for listening. I stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. McLaughlin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bost, Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Takano, and Ranking Member Moran, and members of the committees. My name is Michael McLaughlin, and I currently serve as a County Veteran Service Officer in Blue Earth County, Minnesota. I am also the Legislative Director for the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, or NACVSO. On behalf of NACVSO and its members, it is my honor to share our legislative priorities for ensuring that veterans and their families have access to all the benefits and services they have earned. Governmental Veteran Service Officers, or GVSOs, work at the state, county, tribal, and municipal levels and are the frontline workforce in their communities assisting and advocating veterans every day. County Veteran Service Officers and their local equivalents comprise of over 2/3 of all of VA's accredited veteran service officers and undertake a significant workload on behalf of the federal government in implementing VA policies on behalf of the federal government. This workload includes assisting veterans and their families to file disability claims, enroll in VA health care, coordinate community care programs, access educational benefits, death benefits, homeless services, transportation services, and everything in between. CVSOs are uniquely positioned to help policy and decision makers within VA understand both issues veterans face and how well VA programs are working to address these issues. Although CVSOs are not employees of the VA, they are frequently the first and sometimes only in-person interaction a veteran has when dealing with VA. Despite the fact that federal grant spending to state and local governments is estimated over $1 trillion, or approximately 4.1% of GDP in 2023, none of this funding is designated to support local service officers to carry out their duties on behalf of the VA. County sheriffs and local law enforcement agencies receive funding support from Department of Justice for hiring, training, and carrying out community policing programs. Local social service programs receive funding from the Department of Health and Human Services to provide frontline economic and social well-being programs. These are just a few examples of how the federal government partners every day with local governments, except for when it comes to helping our nation's veterans gain access to the benefits and services they need. Veteran service officers are often among the lowest funded in local governments across the nation, and CVSOs face disparities in staffing levels, technology, education, and outreach due to the complete reliance on local funding. These challenges have become even more acute in recent years with the passing of historic legislation like Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Mission Act, and the PACT Act, to name a few. NACVSO is truly grateful for Congress's action to pass these laws and the life-changing impact they have had on veterans and their families. However, these acts did not consider the additional infrastructure and support required at the local governmental level to meet the increased demand for veteran support services. The expansion of benefits under this new legislation has created a de facto unfunded mandate for local governments across the country who are scrambling to meet the need of influx requests for veteran support. A few examples of that increased demand are El Paso County, Colorado, where wait times for veterans seeking appointments with veteran service officers has increased by over 3 weeks. Lake County, Illinois, where there has been a 400% increase in VA benefit inquiry calls received by staff. The town of Wilbraham, Massachusetts, where 62% of all disability claims filed since August 10th, 2022 have been PACT Act-related claims. Medina County, Ohio, which has experienced a 67% increase in month-to-month claims and a 300% increase in office contacts. These examples represent just a few of thousands similar scenarios playing out in county and local government offices across the country today. And this is why NACVSO supports the bipartisan Commitment to Veteran Support and Outreach Act, the CVSO Act, and encourages the committees to also do so. This act would, for the first time, provide supportive grants from VA to county and local government equivalent offices to improve community support and outreach services for veterans and their families. Support to local governments is something that will ensure veterans have access to an accredited veteran service officer and ultimately access to the benefits and services they have earned and that they deserve. Chairman, ranking members, and members of the committee, NACVSO and its members truly appreciate the work you all are doing here today and throughout this session. State, county, tribal, and municipal service officers are standing at the ready, and we are force multipliers for the federal government. If we can bolster support for local veteran advocates, we will be able to better support the needs of our nation's veterans and their families in the communities in which they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin, and thank you to all the entire panel throughout the testimony. And I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. 3 minutes of questioning. I corrected that because we did that in the earlier panel. Colonel Millets, in your testimony, you noted that more action is needed to combat veteran suicide and that we should ensure VA and DOD release the raw data on suicide. A significant number of deaths labeled as unknown, yet they display signs of self-harm and or overdoses. Do you agree that the VA should investigate more of this data and include it in their annual suicide reports?
Sir, yes. Not only that, but they should form a group with DOD to specifically break down those different categories to determine how they're defined and then go forward from that standpoint. If you don't know the basis of the data, you can't go forward to come to a conclusion. Yes, sir.
You know, in VA is the second largest agency, and this is, and whoever wants to try to answer or whatever, maybe I should just make it in a statement, okay? Let me tell you that whenever I first came to Congress, that the VA committee worked very, did I say very yet? Very hard not to be partisan, okay? Let me ask each one of you, because I want you to think about this in your mind. VA is the second largest agency in the federal budget. We are in an area where we need some places that I know that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. And I don't think any of you sitting at the panel here can say that that does not occur in the second largest bureaucracy in the world. Let me tell you this, that I listened earlier to the other panels, and I want to get this all straightened out pretty quickly. There were some statements that are made in a partisan way that are not truthful. Of the 14 members on the Republican side of the aisle, 9 of us are veterans. We do not want to cut services to our veterans, but we are in a situation that if we don't be smarter with how we're handling our money, China will own our debt, and everybody who served in the uniform will lose because China will own us. I listened to members on this panel criticize and say things that are not true. No one on our side of the aisle, no one wants to cut services to our veterans. I want to be very clear on that. No more than we want to cut, when you hear on the street, we want to cut Social Security and Medicaid. We do not. But we want to be wise with your tax dollars, because you're not just veterans, you're taxpayers. You're not just veterans, you're parents and your grandparents. And there is a time that we have to be wise in what we are doing. And it is my job as chairman of this committee, and I know that Senator Moran's here, and Tesler and Takano, that we've got to work together to wisely spend the money in which we have to provide the services for our veterans and not let abuse occur. And to watch the panels go back and forth at each other, some of them veterans saying, well, I care for veterans more, I'm not going to cut you. I'm not going to cut the benefits. There's a term in my area that I can't use on the mic that I think that is, but it has something to do with when you raise cattle, you know what comes out. And I'm going to tell you that I have taken long enough on the questions, but I want to be very, very clear that we're here to serve you. We're here to, but I ask you to help us. When you see fraud and abuse and you see problems or programs that we're investing in that aren't beneficial to your people that you represent, tell us, for the sake of your children and grandchildren, for the sake of this nation which you fought to defend. With that, I'm going to recognize Senator Moran, Ranking Member Moran.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Boss, thank you very much for recognizing me. I'm pleased to be here. I would let you know that the Senate committee, during a couple of votes on the Senate floor, just approved Joshua Jacobs as the new Undersecretary for Veterans Benefits. And so we have another player in his profession, and we look forward to working with him and the VA to meet our needs of our veterans. And Chairman Boss, not everything is, we can't be everything to everybody, is the way I'd sum up what you said. And we need to make certain that we take care of our veterans, but we also take care of our country, who they so faithfully served. I just have a couple of questions for, and on that regard, today I'm a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We have classified briefings going on. I'm returning, but the threats to our country are significant and great. We care for those who served us in the past, and in doing so, we encourage those to serve today. Our country needs, we need your service, we need good citizens, and we want to do everything we can to make certain that we make the right decisions here. Ms. Carroll, let me begin with you. I thank you for your testimony. I thank you for your organization's work and your partnership that we had in the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson Honoring PACT Act. For surviving families who may not know they are eligible for new benefits or care under the law, would you please share what TAPS is doing in this endeavor to reach those survivors whose loved ones have already passed on?
Yes, it would be my honor. We do have more than 100,000 surviving families who we are in direct contact with. We have been reaching out to all those who have told us that their loved one died of an illness, to inform them of this, to encourage them, if they are not already receiving benefits, to apply. We have put this in our magazine that goes out to a very broad group, extending to other organizations that work with survivors as well. We've been partnering with the Department of Veterans Affairs to prepare a public service announcement that will go out addressing not only survivors but also veterans, but speaking to the whole family, so that word is getting out. We've also been sharing this on all of our social media channels and in chat groups, at events, but we're doing everything that we can to reach out to the 380,000 plus survivors who may not otherwise know and will miss this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for those efforts. Mr. McNeil, thank you for your testimony and sharing the BVA's priorities. Let me ask you to do this. Expand on the importance of nationwide uniform standards for service dogs in VA facilities and how the VA could improve their current practices toward that end.
Thank you for the question. The problem with the service dog program is the dog champion. It's supposed to be at the VA facilities. We have the champions, but they have no job description, so they don't know what they need to do. Then you're looking at the reporting phase of it. If you report to the VA police, their process of no foul, no blood, it's fine. You're talking about a $50,000, $60,000 dog with somebody's 1995 pet they picked up down the street. They need to enforce the standards that the transportation has already put out, that all emotional support and all do not come into a federal facility, especially the VA. We've had cases where members, one member in particular, coming down the hall and his dog was attacked by someone's pet Doberman and the dog was ruined. If a veteran is using a service dog, he's not using his cane for his eyes. That dog is his eyes. Now that the dog is gone, they're stranded. So what are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to get home? How are they going to do everything? When the dog has to go back for training, you're looking at anywhere from 6 months to a year before that veteran receives another dog. So now we're back to the issue of transportation and travel.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you all for being here.
Representative Ramirez.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here today. It's incredibly important for us and those of us who have not served but understand the critical importance of investing and supporting our veterans and their families. So I'm incredibly grateful for you to be here. I wanted to go back to the PACT Act. And we know that it's one of the most significant expansion of benefits and services for toxic exposed veterans in more than 3 decades. And we have a responsibility to ensure that all veterans have meaningful access to comprehensive, quality health care. The PACT Act will significantly remove barriers and paperwork for veterans and their survivors. How, and any of you could answer this, but how have you seen implementation of the PACT Act work since it was signed into law August of 2022? And you started talking a little bit about some of the supports that are still needed with it, but if you could elaborate a little more, what else is needed as we implement?
Congresswoman, thank you for that question. And I think a lot of credit is due to VA with the level of communication and outreach that they have given to all veterans and VSOs. That is something they've done very well. An area where we're going to be watching closely in the coming years is how they implement the presumption process prescribed in the PACT Act. It's early in that process. It remains to be seen how that will be done, but that's going to be a critical piece to make sure that we're not ending up in a similar situation decades from now.
Thank you. So I know our time is limited today. I just want to come back to the importance of supporting our veterans and their families. And I just want to echo some of the sentiment you heard today. The reality is that we have more and more people experiencing homelessness, and when we look at those numbers, we see that nearly, in some cases, 20% of them are veterans. I just heard the last gentleman in his testimony talk about the increased calls coming in. And Lake County is not far from, Lake County in Illinois is not far from my district in DuPage County. And we are seeing that increase across the board in terms of supports. So I want to thank our distinguished leaders today for today's joint Senate and House briefing to receive the legislative VSO's presentation. Service members and veterans should be given the support they need to lead healthy, productive lives once their service has ended. Congress has to make sure that we don't make excuses around cuts here or cuts there. The reality is that we have to make sure that every essential service that you need, but also your family needs, is provided for you. And that means access to good quality housing. That means good health care. That means education, workforce, living wages, and that certainly means investing in mental health supports. I want to say to you that being part of the Veteran Affairs Committee is an honor of my life. Having worked in social services for as long as I did, I understand that investing in you is investing in this country. And this is why I want to just reiterate the commitment we have on this side of the aisle to ensure that veterans are always prioritized. We'll do that this year. We'll continue to do that as we move forward. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo your comments that you made about us caring about veterans, and we do. We absolutely do. So we're going to do the best that we absolutely possibly can. That's my promise to you. Ms. Sipes, I'd like to tell you something. I was in the service for 26 years. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, and I buried more of my friends than I care to remember. I was a corpsman like your husband. And I want you to know that we understand that the debt that is owed to you by this country is not a mortgage. It doesn't get paid off. It is something that we have to give to you every single day. You have my absolute unwavering support, and thank you. Mr. Titus, I'll be chairing a subcommittee meeting on USERRA tomorrow. I read your written comments, and I want you to know you're welcome to come to that. It's a very incredibly important issue. That is a national security issue. When our National Guards and reservists are forward deployed, they need to know that when they come back, they still have a job. And that hasn't been reviewed in a long period of time, and it's going to happen tomorrow. And then I have one question for Mr. McNeil. I get all my health care through the VA. I'm 100% permanently, totally disabled veteran, and you know, I'm a member of Congress, but what's good enough for my brothers and sisters is good enough for me. I recently spoke to the Veterans Administration because they removed our kiosks when you fill out your travel claim. And you know what, $50 is $50, right? I get it. So we're gonna work on that, but I have a question for you, sir, because you are sight impaired. How is it that you guys and gals who are sight impaired are able to, I mean, physically, I'm an enlisted dude, man. You know what I get? Rubber's gotta meet the road. How do you guys actually, how are you facilitated to complete your travel claims? Like, how do you do them? It's a real question. And if it's not good enough, how can we help? That's what I want to know.
Well, thank you for the question. What it comes down to is we were in a sighted world. We now live in an unsighted world, and we have to adjust and adapt to it. You know, even like in this room here right now, I believe there's a timer going. I can't see it. I don't know what time it is. There's no audible cues, so you have to adjust. But when you get to the windows at the VA facilities to cash out, the clerks need to be more helpful in filling out the paperwork, not resisting you or telling you there's too many people behind you. I cannot hand my form to him, let him fill it out because it's got some information that he doesn't need. And if it's a female, that's an issue of safety and security. Now they know where they live at and they got some other information. So if they were able to allow them to fill it out, that's fine. The clerks in my place where I go, they normally help me fill it out, regardless of what the line is. But until they can fix that, go ahead and pay the veteran right there at the facility. And if we have to use an Uber or anything like that, pay them at their rate. The problem that you do have is, according to the regs, 1695, which is 1619, that when the doctor, clinician tells you if you can't get treatment at your facility, you have to be sent to another facility. You're supposed to be paid to the other facility. The clerk's interpretation is they're going to pay you to your home facility. That needs to be correct. They need to quit interpreting and reading into the regulation.
Awesome. Sir, that's what I need to hear. And if you remember from your time in the service, that is 4AC.
Thank you.
That's 4 action for the rest of you civilians out there. I yield back, sir.
Mr. Crane, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
It's great to have you all here. One of my questions to you guys is, this is panel 2. We've heard many panels. One of my concerns is, as a veteran myself who wants to be able to get the best care I can in a timely manner, do you guys feel as if we're doing a good job in making sure that if the VA can't get our service members and our veterans, if they can't get them good health care in a timely manner, they have the capability and the ability to go out in town and get that health care there? I see some heads shaking in the back, but I would like to know from our panelists here what your guys' thoughts on that are. Thank you.
Congressman, if I may, the Mission Act really afforded a lot more opportunity for community care if you can't get the care inside the VA, and the access standards that are set in that law are important. But unfortunately, many of the access standards vary from VA to VA, and especially in the areas of rehabilitative inpatient treatment, there is no access standard. So that's one area that we would like to see adjusted. I think the Mission Act implementation, although it's still, it's a couple years old, is still in the process of, bringing on new providers. And one of the areas that I have heard is reimbursement sometimes takes some time. We provide mental health programs and services outside of what's available in the community care. I think including some of the other nonprofit organizations, as the VA has recently done with Mission Daybreak and implementation of community care partnerships through the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Act, are great news. So those grants to community-based organizations certainly helps in availability of community care for helping veterans that can't get it through the VA.
By a show of hands real quick from all the vets back in the audience, how many of you guys would like to see us veterans have the continued capability and opportunity to be able to go out in town if the VA is not doing a good job? Thank you. Appreciate that. My last statement is for Ms. Sipes. I thank you, ma'am, for your attendance today. And I didn't know that about spouses are only getting about 43% to their other government spouse counterparts at 55%. And I hope that this Congress is able to take care of that. Thank you, ma'am. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Representative Eli Crane. Thank you all the witnesses for coming out today. I really appreciate all of your testimony. Each of you represent a segment of the veterans population that has unique needs and challenges that need to be addressed. So each of those particular pieces of information were critically important. And I appreciate the willingness to take time out of your busy lives to come to Washington, D.C. and be here with us. Your testimony and commitment to veterans are paramount as we conduct our work during the 118th Congress. Ms. Sipes, thank you again for your testimony, your heartfelt testimony, and for sharing your personal story. I can only imagine how difficult that it must have been losing your husband at the age of 28 with 3 young children. I have 3 sons of my own, been married for 37 years. I can't imagine. I really appreciate your willingness to share your story publicly. Your bravery serves as an inspiration for other Gold Star spouses to know that they are not alone and that there is a support network out there in their time of need. In your testimony, you pointed out that surviving spouses are punished for getting remarried before the age of 55. I think marriage is fundamentally a good thing and should not be disincentivized. I say many times over, we cannot build a strong nation with weak families. And the information that you shared seems to weaken the family. Can you please elaborate on your story and your agenda?
Yes, in regards to the remarriage, it did change, law did change years later, of course, to the 55. The challenge is that if we choose to remarry, we lose all of our benefits unless we are over 55 years old. And that puts us in a position of not being able to move on. It puts us in a position of having to raise our children without a spouse or a father figure or somebody in their lives to help raise them. And should we choose to remarry and lose those benefits, then that other spouse is now responsible, right, for our spouse's children. The foster care pays more in helping raise a child than the government does. So it is just really, really an unfair advantage for spouses, and they cannot continue their lives on in a normal manner.
Thank you very much. And like Representative Crane, I did not realize either that there was this discrepancy in the amount of compensation that was coming from other government employees. We're now going to go to Representative Levin.
Thank my friend from Montana. Great to see everyone. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you for your service. And I wasn't here to hear the chairman's comments regarding the debt limit, but let me just personally state that I really look forward to working with the majority in the coming months, hopefully to resolve the debt limit situation without using our veterans as a bargaining chip. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that no colleague that I've spoken with, whether Democratic or Republican, wants to see a single penny of veterans' benefits or programs cut, and I will make it one of my personal priorities this year to ensure that that does not happen. And that's how it'll always be around here. I hope it'll continue to be on a bipartisan basis, as it's been since I got to Congress a number of years ago. I wanted to turn to a couple of pieces of legislation that I've specifically been advocating for, and Mr. Titus, I'll begin with you. It's got a lot of people up here today. But in your testimony, you stated that, and I quote, "Every day of service should count towards earned education and other benefits, regardless of a service member's type of orders." Unfortunately, that is not the case for our Reserve and National Guard service members, end quote. I think you know that since the tragic attacks of 9/11, National Guard and Reserve members are increasingly serving on the front lines, and they're there, responding to the greatest challenges in our nation, whether it's climate disasters, the pandemic. We certainly saw so many that were here at the nation's capital in the aftermath of January 6th. My opinion, and I believe yours, is we can't continue to ask Guard and Reserve to respond to these types of crises without providing them with the same GI Bill benefits as the active duty service members that they serve alongside in many cases. So we're going to reintroduce our Guard and Reserve Parity Act. That's another one we will never give up until that one's across the finish line. It's too important. Would ensure that every day spent in uniform counts towards GI Bill benefits. We passed the bill in the House with broad bipartisan support, thanks to many in this room, and I look forward to working with my Senate colleagues. I wish they were here right now so we could talk to them in person about this, but we really do look forward to working with them to ensure that we get that across the finish line this Congress. So with all that as background, Mr. Titus, can you discuss the importance of GI Bill parity for Guard and Reserve members, and how would GI Bill parity help with recruitment specifically?
Congressman, thank you for that question, and thank you for all your hard work on this issue. We came close last year, and it's our sincere hope that we can pick up and get this over the finish line this Congress. When deciding whether to either enlist or join the Guard or Reserves or transfer over from the active component, service members are asking their friends, they're asking their family, and when the answer they get back is, you're not treated the same, you're not going to have your service recognized the same way as when you're on active duty or your friend's on active duty. That's a really hard pill to swallow when, as you mentioned, sir, that the demand on the reserve component goes far beyond 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. We need to truly embrace the total force concept, and the first step in this is getting the GI Bill parity for the reserve component. It's a powerful recruiting tool, and we need to take it off the shelf and get it put into law.
Well, I'm out of time, but I just wanted to say thanks to you for your partnership. I wanted to thank every single person in this room for their service, and it's a great honor of mine, and I believe of everyone serving on the House Veterans Affairs Committee with all the craziness going on in Washington, D.C., where we actually work together to try to get things done for you and give back just a bit after you've given so much to this nation. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Representative Latrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to be, this is arguably the safest room in the Capitol right now with all my brothers and sisters sitting out here, so, I mean, such an amazing feeling sitting in front of all you. I'm going to, a few statements and then I'll ask my question. Healthcare records. We all understand, and many of you spoke about the healthcare records and the data transfer and the challenges that we face in that. Know that this committee is addressing that as best we can. Our veterans' data is one of the most precious assets we have in this country. And we will not have a breach in any way. And that's where the challenge is, because healthcare departments, they all work in silos. And we're systematically trying to integrate all of these different areas. And it's very challenging. I've been working on the electronic healthcare records since 2016. And the VA is a very closed loop when it comes to us and our information, okay? So Congress is very actively trying to engage with that. Baseline assessment, sir. You're spot on. When it comes to mental health, the veterans' health, from the day that we enter into basic training, we should be assessed. Right now, we have to deal with injured brains and bodies. When they get out into the veteran space and then we do those initial assessments in the VAs, we're already broken. And we are working with the services right now to implement proper baseline assessments so that healthcare record can travel with that particular individual and all the way up until the day that we put them in the ground. That way we know how far they're digressing or flourishing, okay? No, just another one of those things that we're addressing behind the scenes, and it's something that we don't have the ability to, get the word out as best we can, but I want you to hear me say that right here in front of you as a veteran. Ms. Sipes, I pray for you and everyone else religiously. My wife and kids and I do that, so thank you for coming up here and spending this day with us. Mr. McNeil, the service animal guidelines, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that has really come off the rails. I think people have taken advantage of the situation, and the ones that are suffering are the ones that actually have to have the service animals. So I would actually, if it's possible, I'd like to sit down with you and the group so you could outline that for us, what you want. Because those of us that don't have service animals, I would say we're just throwing Jell-O at the wall where you're the subject matter expert. Are you good with that, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. And just so you know, and it needs to be said that Mr. Van Orden sitting behind me is not an attractive man at all.
Good to know.
Fellow SEAL, I had to throw that out. Okay, so let me get to my question, sir. Mr. General Lennington, this is coming to you. So telehealth, right, in our rural areas, a very aggressive movement in the proper direction, but sometimes it falls short, it seems. But here's the issue that I've tried to get my head around. Is I moved out to the country because I don't want anybody to talk to me. I don't want anybody to mess with me, and I could pick 20 people out in this room right now. They're doing the same thing. But then we have the individuals that do live in the rural areas that need the VA's assistance. They want that telehealth. So here we have this give and take. Now for us, we're trying to get our head around that. And make no mistake about it, this needs to be said. Veterans are hard to deal with. I mean, we're hard to wrangle. I mean, we can be like really aggressive. And as a veteran, but somebody who's in the science and research space and now in the legislators, I mean, we have to be better about telling our brothers and sisters, be calm and be generous to the care to our caregivers, especially Marines. You guys would just take the cake. I usually get a response from Marines when you're in the crowd. We don't have a Marine in here? Okay, thank you. Sir, how do we address that? What's the best? It gets even more complex when we get into the tribes. I have a tribe in my district, and they fall short as well. But they're reluctant to have me walk in because I'm an outsider. What are your thoughts?
I would say telehealth. COVID was a big test, and during COVID, telehealth was amazing in veterans connecting with healthcare, especially mental health care through telehealth. I think what we have to be careful of is allowing telehealth alone to meet the access standards for veterans that want to be seen in person. I think that's where abiding by the access standards that the Congress has set for the VA for community care, outside of the VA, and with some of the private partners that want to help in the areas of mental health or other health areas need to be enhanced. So you're exactly right. Some veterans appreciate the privacy and anonymity that come with telehealth, especially in the behavioral health areas. Some veterans want to be seen by a provider, and we got to be able to do both and do both well.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Luttrell. Representative Budzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start out by saying a sincere thank you to all of the veterans that are here today and the panelists for participating. Your testimony really helps to inform us on, the ongoing barriers that veterans are facing. And in particular, I've been very interested, again, in the mental health space and making sure that our veterans get access to care. And again, in rural communities, which are very similar to the district that I represent. I have a lot of rural communities in it. I was very excited and encouraged on January 17th, the VA announced that veterans in suicidal crisis can now receive the free world-class emergency health care that they deserve, no matter where they need it, when they need it, or whether they're enrolled in VA care or not. I think it's a welcome first step, but we still need to continue this work. And so my question is for Mr. Vedvik. Can you share with us some of your perspectives regarding the VA's suicide prevention strategy, and what more should we and can we be doing in that work?
Thank you for the question. Obviously, our members are increasingly affected by suicidal thoughts and ideations, and so they're always needing more and more help. And I guess the assumption is that it's always younger veterans, which isn't the case. What I would like to see is a more concentrated effort on informing our older veterans who are isolated, ruminating at home, and giving them the tools that they need to be able to contact the VA and get help that they need.
Thank you. And I guess a follow-up to that is, as the COVID public health emergency is ending and the VA's legal authority regarding telehealth, which we were just talking about, are rolled back, I am concerned that those who can and should be reached through telehealth will no longer have access. So can you talk a little bit more about the importance of telehealth? And I agree, not as the only modality that veterans can access, because some will want in-person services. But are there any barriers or any concerns that you have with this rollback in the May 11th date coming up?
No, I'm sorry. Right, for telehealth, I think that's a critical tool. It's like it's been brought up before, rural areas, it's critical for them. And even in areas where you have a job, you have something going on, you can't always just get up and do what you're doing, you can't leave. I know individuals, veterans who are using telehealth, on their work breaks, or like trying to actually get the care they can when they can. Because not everybody can just drop what they're doing, they have to take care of their families. And so allowing them the flexibility of telehealth, I think, is critical. It's not always the best way to do it, but at least is a tool that can be used if they need to.
But you're not concerned with any of the post-May 11th, when the national emergency is lifted, that any of those services that are currently provided will end?
Of course. We would love to see that extended as well.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank you for your testimony. This does conclude our series of joint VSO hearings. I think it's clear that our committees and the VA have more work to do in service to our veterans and their families. To all of our VSO partners who participated in the hearings over the past 2 weeks, and to the many organizations who dedicate themselves to this mission, thank you for what you do and what are now our front lines. Our veterans deserve no less than the best in recognition for their service. I ask unanimous consent that all members shall have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material. Hearing no objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.